microphones.
The microphone's right ahead.
Good. Okay, thank you. Good morning. This board retreat meeting at Lone Star College System Board of Trustees is now called to order at 9 a.m. Central Time. Our second item of business is Pledge Allegiance, and I've asked Trustee Vogt to lead us in the American Pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Trustee Vogt. Next item of business is roll call. Trustee Saldivar.
Here.
Thank you. Trustee Wilson.
Here.
Thank you. Trustee Broussard.
Present.
Thank you. Trustee Stoma.
I'm here.
Thank you, sir. Present online. Trustee Mesa is. Sorry, you have to say here.
Here.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Trustee Barrio.
Here.
Thank you. Trustee Vogt.
Here.
Thank you. Trustee Kane.
Here.
Thank you. Chancellor Castillo, has the notice for this meeting been posted?
I certify that the posting of the notice of this meeting has been done so in compliance with the law, Chair.
Thank you very much, Chancellor. Public comment. Ms. Barnett, has anyone signed up to offer a public comment?
No, sir.
Thank you very much. The Board of Trustees, in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, will now move into closed session under one or more of the following provisions of the Act. Section 551.071, Section 551.072, Section 551.074, and Section 551.076. The current time is 9:02 a.m. Trustees will now move to another room and staff will lead us or direct us.
In a minute, huh?
Yeah.
Thank you. Reconvene this meeting at 10:58 a.m. We'll now move to agenda item 8, special reports and considerations. We will now move forward with the consideration of the agenda item. May I have a motion to consider action item 1?
So move. Stoma, so move.
Yes, sir. Have a motion by Trustee Stoma. May I have a second?
Second.
Second by Trustee Kane. We'll now move to discussion. Is there any discussion on item 1? And I'll start on this side of the table and then come over to this side. And once again, I assure everyone that you will have an opportunity to speak. So if you're passed over the first time, we'll certainly get to you the second time. Trustee Vogt.
I'm gonna take a pass on this time around, but I would like to speak.
Okay, Trustee Broussard. Any questions or comments?
No.
Okay, Trustee Wilson.
I do have a comment. This is a really important vote. And I know that we're, however we feel or put feelings in it, but I feel like we need to focus on what's lost. And we need to think about what comes after the vote. And we need to be real honest with ourselves. We really do. We need to think about it, and we need to think about what the judge said. And don't make it a point to where we're thinking about failing. We gotta think about the law. We gotta think about what's right. We have to do the right thing. And I'm always on the side of doing the right thing. And law is always the right thing. And that's all I'm gonna say.
Thank you. I really probably should have read the item,
Oh.
consideration of approval to file motion to vacate in the United States District Court for the Southern District of Texas in response to the court order issued on February 6th, 2025, action item 1. So, are we still good?
Yeah, I'm good, yeah. I just like,
We'll come back. around.
yeah, I got it.
Trustee Salazar?
No.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Mesa?
Yes, I would like to say, or I guess, say in public that, earlier this month, the board took a vote, which was unanimous, to withdraw this order. And, I know now that even if that withdrawal would have been processed, it was still up to the judge, which I understand and I respect. And so with this motion, since it is under my name, I would just like to remind everyone that, the vote that we all took earlier this month was unanimous. And it was to withdraw, and so I read that as moving on for the better of the board and to not erode public trust by keeping this in the light. And so I think with this motion to vacate, I don't think it'll be unanimous, but I do think it's a continuation of the original vote, which was unanimous. And it's still, up to the decision of the judge, which I understand and respect. But so this is just another option that we have as a governing body to do things that are in the best interest of the college. And so that's my intent. I also, I agree with Trustee Wilson that this is an important vote. And I'm trying not to put any feelings into it either. I'm just going with what the unanimous decision was earlier this month. And so given that option, again, since we have that option, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Mesa. And Trustee Stone, I'll come to you last. Trustee Kane?
This is a very difficult decision because we want to be fair not only to Mr. Mesa, but also to Mrs. Peterson. We want to follow the law. We want to make sure that our decision is in keeping with the best interest of the college. From time to time, based upon circumstances, organizations do file motions to vacate a judge's order, to send it back to the judge for reconsideration because of extenuating circumstances. I think we have extenuating circumstances here that justify filing a motion to vacate. Number one, as has been pointed out already, February, this board unanimously agreed that this matter was closed. Number two, Trustee Mesa was sworn in December and has already attended 2 board meetings and today's retreat. Those are extenuating circumstances that I think can be placed in front of a judge should we vote to send this motion to vacate to the judge. So I think it makes a lot of good sense, not only from the standpoint of looking at things legally, but also in the best interest of this college and this board to file this motion. So I support this.
Thank you, Trustee
Let me
Kane.
offer a correction, Chair. I was
Yes, sir.
sworn in November.
So there's 3 board meetings.
No,
I have attended a total of 3.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because there was
3.
one in December and then the second one in December.
3. Thank you for that correction. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Maria.
I shared my opinion and with my colleagues, that clearly it's a difficult decision. It's hard to not make it personal, and never like having to think legalistically only, that. But I shared my thoughts on how I arrived at my decision. So, but I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Maria. Trustee Stoma?
I agree and support Trustee Mesa's statement. And I have nothing else to add. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, trustee Stoma. I said I'd come back around one more time. Trustee voted pass, so we'll go to trustee vote for any comment.
I got some clarification on exactly how overreaching this original failure of the proper organization of our voting and how widespread the differences were. I was I didn't understand that it basically threw us out of the single member district category and allowed voting at large. And I'm really in looking at it, we should have done something different much earlier. I think.
Oh, sir,
That's all I have to say.
thank you. Trustee Griswold.
I do want to say something after all. It's hard for me to speak. Didn't have a voice yesterday. Trustee Pierce and trustee Mesa have both served well. But to me, when a federal judge speaks, we have to listen. To me, when a federal whatever a federal judge does or says trumps whatever we vote on or whatever we do here as a board. So even though we voted last month, it becomes null and void to whatever a federal judge does. And I don't want to do anything as a board against what a federal judge says and does.
It's be our last time to go around this.
That's
Okay,
fine.
trustee Wilson.
Yeah, trustee vote, I totally agree with your sentiments, like we should have taken action before. I've always been the champion since October, finding out like, hey, we gotta do something. We gotta start over, we gotta do it again, because I did not want to be in this position, and it's heartbreaking, because nobody wins.
Trustee Salvo.
I agree with my colleagues. It is a very difficult position. Because no matter what we say here or what our vote goes, you know, there's two individuals who will be affected. So it's a complete, it's difficult. But I want to be very transparent and open, not only to you, my colleagues, but also to the public, that my vote solely goes with what the judge's order is. I just feel like if a federal judge mentions or orders something that we, you know, to us that we ought to do, we need to follow it. That's setting the sentiments aside. I love working with both of y'all, but my vote would be to what the judge's order is. It's just simple.
Excellent.
I'll just say, I'll just acknowledge and respect the sentiments of my colleagues with regards to wanting to honor and respect the judge's order. And I'll just further acknowledge our differences in opinion in that regard. But I do want to say I acknowledge and respect that.
Thank you, trustee Mason. Trustee Kane.
I've never did.
Trustee Kane. Trustee Maria. Thank you, trustee Maria. Trustee Stoney, any additional comments before we take a vote?
I have no further comments. Thank you.
Thank you. To help me, I'd like for either the chancellor or board counsel to like I like to say, and y'all hear me say it, explain in a blue collar language what we're voting for and what it does, not opinions, of course, but which of you would like to, because this, I don't want this to be, did we vote no to vote yes or something?
I think it's a legal question, sir, so I'll
Okay.
defer it.
Yes, Chair. What this motion would do, as we sit here today, we have an order signed by the federal judge on college of an election. And that was an order that had been requested by the college, which was questioned on all of this. This motion, if approved, would be authorizing the orders for the university to go back to the judge and asking the judge to reconsider his order and to withdraw it, basically, so that there would not be an order requiring the college to have another election. So it's not in any way saying the college won't comply with the existing order. It's asking the judge to withdraw his order. So I want to make that clear. And that would give Trustee Mesa and Trustee Pierce also an opportunity to wait if they would like in that proceeding over what they think should be done. So that's what this would do. It's just authorize the lawyers at the request of the judge to consider the withdrawal of his order.
Okay, very good.
Is it a proper for
Yes,
me
sir.
to ask a legal?
Yes, sir, absolutely. Trustee
So-
Maria.
Thank you, Chairman. So in terms of process, our option that is before us allows us to engage or at least to request. I'm sorry, I'm reading it just to make sure I understand. Okay, to vacate the order. Is it possible that the judge will ask us for more information or for?
It is possible that the judge will grant the order without having a hearing, deny it without having a order a hearing. We really can't say what the judge will do.
Okay, so we don't know, yeah, okay, so there's, in either way, whether it goes one way or the other, challenges can occur legally or there's other, this can go on for a while. Well, I'm just-
It's very hard to predict.
It's hard.
It could be
That's what I
done in
did say.
a few days, it could go on.
Yes, that's all.
But all this motion does is authorize the lawyers to file the motion and put it back in front of the judge.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Maria. Trustee Kane? Yes,
I
sir.
do have another question.
Yes, sir.
If this motion does pass and the judge reconsiders the extenuating circumstances that we present to him, but still maintains his original decision that you shall hold a new election, do we have a timeline for when that new election would take place?
I would defer to your, but no, the short answer is no. I think that would be handled by your election council. It probably should be discussed and
The reason I ask is that Harris County is scheduled to hold an election on May 3rd with early voting in April. And so I didn't know if we would be headed in that direction or another.
So I can answer that. So the deadline for the May 3rd election has come and gone.
Is-
Has come and gone.
Has come and gone?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So May is probably not in the cards, although again, the federal judge could order Harris County to let us in late, I guess. I don't want to predict what the federal judge is gonna do, but I can tell you that if we're following the normal course of deadlines, the deadline for the May election has come.
Has come and gone. So may I ask another
Yes, sir.
question? If all, just continuing that line of thought, would we hold our own election then sometime between May the 3rd and November? Would we do it ourselves?
So trustee Kane, as you and I have discussed, that would be something that depending on how this vote comes up, would be on the March board meeting, which is 4 business days from today.
Okay.
So that's largely contingent on what happens in the next few minutes. We will discuss that if that situation materializes in 4 business days.
Okay, thank you.
Real quick,
Yes, sir. Trustee Maria.
Thank you. If a special election, do we have to pay for that?
Yes.
It's all us, right? Do we have an idea how much it's gonna cost?
I hazard to say in a public meeting that I know how much it would cost, but if we run it ourselves, it would be more expensive than if we pay Harris County.
No ballpark.
And that's where I will not volunteer number.
Thank you.
Okay, discussion is now closed on this item and we will proceed to do a roll call vote. Trustees, when I state your name, please respond aye if you are in favor of the item passing, nay if you are voting against the item, or abstain if you are abstaining. Trustee Saldivar.
Nay.
Trustee Saldivar, nay. Trustee Wilson.
Nay.
Trustee Wilson, nay. Trustee Broussard.
Nay.
Trustee Broussard, nay. Trustee Stoma.
Yay.
Trustee Stoma, yay. Trustee Mesa.
Aye.
Trustee Mesa, aye. Trustee Murillo.
Aye.
Trustee Murillo, aye. Trustee Vogt.
Aye.
Trustee Vogt, aye. Trustee Kane.
Aye.
Trustee Kane, aye. Now Mike Sullivan will vote nay. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ayes. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 nays. We have no abstentions. The item, correct me if I'm wrong, but the item passes.
Yes.
Okay. Very good. We will now move to the next item, which is Chancellor and CFO presentation. Dr. Deanne, please proceed to the podium for your presentation. There's no podium. So. Oh, that podium. Okay, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Trustee Stoma, can you see me okay? Perfect. Let me,
He's muted.
okay, just want to make sure. So I have quite a few slides to go through with you all. Please feel free to ask any questions that you have along the way. Obviously, I want to present the content and it to be interactive, but I also want you to be able to ask any questions. Obviously, I know this content can be somewhat deep and challenging, and I know, going through it quickly, I want to be respectful of your time, but I also want to make sure that we have a chance to engage. Because really, this is about the finances of our.
Dr. Deanne, if I may, I
Yep.
spoke with the chair and I know we're behind about an hour. He very graciously agreed on behalf of the board to give you your full time. We may have to take a break in there,
Yes,
but
sir, please.
we know you worked really hard on this and the board wants to hear everything you have to say.
Thank
But
you.
let's plan on taking a short break at 12, but not a lunch break, just for discussion.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank
But take
you.
your time.
Thank you, Chair, and
Really
thank you,
cool.
Board. Because this really is about our finances, and I say our because it really is impacting.
Sorry, I'm sorry. Do we have the slides on here by chance?
You should, I did provide those, to
They're
everyone.
actually up here.
Okay. Thank you, sorry.
But no, you're from, it's like a wedding. I don't always know all the different parts, so I just, show up and give all things. So as we talk about the finances, it really is important. This really is the finance. It is the heartbeat of the institution. So I want to make sure that if there's something that you see that you please ask about. You can always ask for additional information. I can bring that later, or we can get into that dialogue now. So just as we look at the overall conversation today, I want to kind of give you a year in review. It's been a year since we gave a full presentation to the board. And go through all the details. Some of it will be a refresher for you, and some of you, it may be new information. So we want to kind of go through all of those information. But I also wanted to start the meeting by expressing my gratitude. My gratitude to the Chancellor for his support, for his team's support, for all of my colleagues, the Vice Chancellors, and especially the Board of Trustees. I really appreciate the confidence that you've given us this past year in supporting as we really dug into the finances of the institution and worked to make that for the betterment of our students and our faculty and our employees. And so I really wanted to just start off by saying how grateful I am for each and every one of you and all the support and encouragement that you have provided. I know a lot of questions come up and this is a very important topic, so I just didn't want to start it off without saying thank you. And a sincere thank you for all of you that you do and volunteer your time towards achieving the goals of our system. So I wanted to provide a high-level overview. I know many times we get to introduce the vice chancellor, the associate vice chancellors
of finance at the various meetings, but I wanted to provide you a high-level overview of the team behind the scenes. Won't spend a lot of time there, but I did want to make sure that you were aware of all of the folks that we have working on behalf of the system. The past year it's been a lot, right? It's been, every good job is worth, that's worth doing is worth doing well. And so we've really spent a lot of the past year looking at the finance teams, looking at the system finances, really uncovering rocks, if you will. And I think you may have heard me say that sentiment last year as well. But we really have spent the last year working on improving the processes and really looking to be transparent when we talk about our finances. One of the biggest challenges that the chancellor gave to me as well as the board was to work on procurement. That was acknowledged to be a big challenge for our vendors. It was a big challenge for our departments. We wanted to make sure that we engaged more small businesses. We wanted to make sure that we reached out into the community and that we made it easy to do business with Lone Star. And I would have to say that sometimes in the past that may not have been as easy to work with us as we would have liked, as well as transparent. So we spent the last year really working to restructure our procurement area, to really spend time and attention to retraining the commodity team members to make sure we were following all state, local, processes and procedures. So I'm very proud to tell you we've made tremendous strides in that area. We've had lots of positive feedback from our community. So again, wanted to make sure we brought that to your attention today to let you know all the time and attention. We spent over 60 hours just retraining that team, hiring new individuals and retraining them to make sure that they were supporting the campuses. Because again, it's great to set a budget, but if we make it hard to buy the things, or if we're not doing that well, then obviously that can be challenging. So we've really spent a lot of time and attention to that, dedicated the internal websites. We dedicated new support just for training. We've hired a new individual to work with small businesses to help local vendors be able to work with us and set up themselves to do business through the quote process. So very important process, and one that we're very pleased that we could work on.
Dr. Vian? This is Mike Stoma. In the past, one of the objections to small businesses is they're small businesses. And our procurement process requires a lot of resources for them to just respond and bid. So they choose not to bid it when they're probably well qualified to do it. They just don't have the resources to put towards the response we require. Have you guys done anything to mitigate that?
Yes, sir. So we've implemented a new software that allows vendors to be able to work with us easy. Like I said, we've hired an additional person who is sole job is to go out and help work with vendors, help them get established. We've made the process for actually signing up as a vendor to be more streamlined. And then we are actually working to have more events this upcoming year where we're actually engaging. What I'd like to see us do is also engage our larger vendors, because to your point, sometimes it may not be that they can handle the business that we could do, but they could sub with a larger vendor. So some of those conversations are why we've hired a small business coordinator to work with our small business development team, as well as other resources to make sure that that those vendors know they can partner with each other, as well as with us independently. So yes, all those are strategic goals for procurement this past year and this upcoming year to get better at developing those relationships.
Great, thank you. Yes, it did. Thank you.
So again, I just put this slide in there for your informational purposes to make sure that you are aware of all the different changes that we've made in that area. We've also worked with started getting ready to be primed for a potential ERP implementation. That will be a lot of time and attention for the procurement team. So we want to make sure that you are aware. And I'll go into a little bit more about that in just a second. So auxiliary services, you saw at my presentation where we highlighted the team. This is something we're really proud of for a system of our size. When we originally, when I got to Lone Star, we did not have a dedicated auxiliary services team. We had various things that were kind of embedded at different places, but we've also spent the last year hiring and moving those dedicated support into one area so that they could better support our system and, more importantly, our students. I know you've heard the chancellor talk about food service. You've heard me talk about that being a priority, and we continue to work on that throughout the year. So we were able to implement dining at all of the locations. We just got through doing a refresh at Montgomery. You may or may not remember that Montgomery campus, their kitchen, while we could do some catering and things, their kitchen was not prepared to, you couldn't actually cook out of there. So we just got that up and operational, and they have definitely hit the ground running, and their students and their staff are very appreciative of the cafeteria being reopened to full capacity there. We did also begin offering $2 value menus. So we have chicken nuggets, quesadillas, sandwiches. And I say that, why is that important? Why is that important for the CFO to talk about $2 hamburgers or $2 chicken nuggets? Because it was very intentional that we wanted to make sure that all students had access to food, to a hot lunch that day. And our local director for food services, our food partner, was also a first time, he was a Lone Star student. So it's also something he's very passionate about. We have a lot of high school students as well that eat lunch with us as part of one of our partners. So I just wanted to kind of highlight that specific thing because, and I actually eat that myself quite a few times during the month, just to make sure that, you know, we're serving things that are up for par, and there are things that I would want to make sure that I would also eat. And so just wanted to highlight that. We are going to give Tomball and North Harris cafeterias a facelift, if you will, the next few, over the next course of the year. EDC Johnson and I have already started a plan on that, so that we can also get those two cafeterias, give them some love that they need. So a lot of the rest of the cafeterias, you know, are where they need to be, but we want to spend special time and attention there. We've analyzed vending across the system to make sure that we have new products and services. We've added vending machines. You may have seen them in the airport. They're like your Just Baked, so you can get hot items, hot pretzel items. We've even implemented an ice cream machine that's been very popular. So again, just trying to bring new products, so not only are servicing our students after hours, but also providing items for people that are on quick and on-the-go meals. We've allocated funds to the food pantries and provided structure to them so that they could have one, you know, simplified approach, and that we're serving all students regardless of the campus at the same level. So just wanted to kind of go through some of those high items. Campus stores, we also have gotten those up and operational, and our new equitable access program, which is textbooks for our students, will start in the fall. So we're really excited to bring a program to campus that is going to provide low-cost materials to our students and make it accessible to everyone. Yes, sir.
Is this digital?
Yeah, so the program will be what we call digital first. And that was very intentional, though faculty can request that their books be physical if there's some extenuating circumstances. So we do have a process in place that our deans and DPIs can approve physical materials if that is what's needed for the class. We've just found that digital is oftentimes what our students prefer, because they can take it on the go. They don't have to worry about carrying books. Most of them in high school right now don't have.
Smaller backpack.
Yeah, smaller backpack, right? And more importantly, they can access it from their phone or their laptop or any device, and don't have to worry about transporting that. So yes, it will be a digital first model, but even beyond that, I think it's important to know our students would have their textbooks day one, regardless of their SEO, their socioeconomic status, or their ability to pay. So if somebody's even on a payment plan, we would provide their books for them day one, and they would be able to help. And so the more important thing is not only are they low cost, but students have their books day one, and we do show that it helps with retention. So great question. So. All right, so again, just some pictures here. Again, I highlighted the value items. You can see that we have the different cafeterias, the new vending machine. And then of course, our students are very excited about their new swag. I've been excited to see all the swag that all the students walking around. They're very proud of their Lone Star College sweatshirts and t-shirts. So if you have not had an opportunity, I would love to have you stop by one of our campus stores and go in and give your feedback, pick up some swag. They have some really nice items in there. And more importantly, they're at a very good price point. And that was also part of our intentional conversation. I know I've been at college and university bookstores, and sometimes you can get, you know, shock or sticker shock from those. And so we've also got lots of positive feedback from our community at the prices that we are. So they're very reasonable. You can pick up a hoodie or a sweatshirt for, you know, as low as like $20, $25, $28, which is really good in today's market. So definitely encourage you, if you haven't had the chance to go by there, to please go by there and address that.
Dr. Bean, we can go back one slide.
Yes,
I want
sir.
to highlight something for the board and compliment the people who are behind this. Right there. So, you know, Dr. Bien sort of talks about how we brought back sort of the swag, but I really encourage you, we have actually one of these, I think, spirit shops on the second floor. To go visit it, at some point today if you can. Not only did they bring the stores back, but it's fresher, and it's hard to describe sort of like the logos and the clothes. They're more in line with what someone who's 18, 19, 20 years old would wear. And there's actually some items already that I've seen several people posting on social media, like this is the hat to have. And so there's essentially now this culture of wanting to wear the clothes, which, to be quite candid with you, before sort of this updated logo, not even updated logo, updated sort of designs, right? There's things in there that are pink and fluffy, and then there's things that are more like, futuristic. There's even like a really nice puffer jacket in there. And so there's a wide variety of new and sort of fresh clothes. And so I wanted to commend the folks, because everything that Dr. Bean and her staff do is very, very intentional. Right? So it's not just let's open up the spirit shops. It's okay, let's open them up, and if we have things that, you have, like when I was in college, 15, 20 bucks, and you want to buy a t-shirt, can you buy one? Are there different designs and things of that nature? Also, by the way, we have started a pilot program this spring with Dr. Vian's help. I got a lot of feedback. There was some faculty members that wanted supplies. So we actually have given all people who teach a class, which is far broader than faculty members, right? Everyone who teaches a class can come into one of the bookstores and spend up to $50 to buy office supplies. And so that's another sort of thing that this is able to do. It's also kind of become the hangout spot, because they put sort of couches and things. And so you have, just on this very campus yesterday when I was leaving, there was a group of students just literally playing the guitar out in the common. And so because we have food now, because we have the spirit shop, it's creating a more culture on campus sort of vibe. I can tell you, I've worked here 10 years and been to all the campuses, and it was the first time that I saw someone literally with an amp and a guitar playing out in the commons. And so it's all part of sort of trying to create a culture to retain the students, right? Because if they don't have to leave to buy things, either like food or different things, a pen or whatever, we keep them on campus, they tend to then go to class. And that's really sort of a long-term strategy. So, and you guys met Mr. Reeves, by the way. He was the gentleman that was interviewed at the last board meeting. Mr. Reeves is in charge of supply management and procurement. So that's another part of the reason that we introduced them. But thank you, Dr. Vian.
Thank you for highlighting that. And we've all, oh, yes, sir.
We, I have two things. Do we get a discount like as trustees? Get a trustee discount?
So, faculty and staff and trustees also do get a discount, so on the material. So yes, you do get to go in there and show them your, and,
I think sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, hey, no, I gotta save those dollars. Definitely understand that. That was the first question people were wanting to know, is like, do we get our discount? Yes, and they do get a discount off of the merchandise. And one of the additional things that we've added is we're actually carrying computers now. So kind of going back to the digital thing, we heard from students is that not everybody had access, because many high schools provide a computer or device. And so sometimes there is a gap. And so we did start that with the launch of our online store, as well as our face-to-face stores, that students can use their financial aid at the beginning of the semester to get computers. And they're good computers. Again, we really worked with the vendor to highlight 3 specific computers that were at different price points. So students can use their aid and actually get a device as well. And with the help of several of the presidents and Dr. Wright from Houston North, we're going to continue to work on that program and be very intentional to make sure all of our students have the devices they need. So yeah, thank you for the feedback, Chancellor, and again, welcome you. We're just getting started. We're not done, with what we're offering. So we want to expand those services. Yes, sir.
I also wanted to ask, I guess on a more serious note, regarding, and I remember watching the board meeting, so I don't think I was here yet, but there was an approval for a payment plan to get textbooks. What's the name of it?
So it's called our Star Bundle.
Okay.
So our Star Bundle is equitable access or Star Bundle program.
Okay.
And so it's actually where all of our students, as part of tuition and fees, and I will highlight that in a second, is $21 per credit hour. So about $60 all in. A student will get all their resources that they need for their books day one. And so that's kind of going back to our conversation earlier about digital first. They will be digital textbooks. unless the professor decides, but everyone will have access to those books. And if they're on a payment plan, financial aid, whatever it is, they'll be advanced all their books. So there's no more having to necessarily order their books or do all that stuff. We will just provide that automatically to them as part of our D2L platform. So they will be able to literally carry their books around with them in their device and have access to that.
And you're gonna talk more about that.
Yes, I can, but if I don't get to all of it, like I said, please let me know and I'm happy
Sure.
to expand on that. So,
Well, I'm curious because I talked to a student, just out in the community
Yeah.
about this program. Cause I'm excited about it. I like it. And so I've gotten just informal feedback. So I want to ask if y'all are planning or if there's a process to get feedback from students, maybe
Yeah.
post semester.
yes,
The
so,
student related to me that she's a nursing student,
Mhm.
so she had trouble with
Yeah.
with the program.
and nursing, so this is a new program that will be for fall. So right now it's not implemented. So
Okay.
this will be coming this fall. Nursing is also in that program, and nursing students as well as workforce kits, all of those larger expensive items that sometimes prohibit a student from having access to a program, because nursing books could be $1,600 to $2,000.
Right.
So those nursing books are also a part of this program. So those students also will have access to their books for the $21 per credit hour. But to your point, yes, we've been surveying students along the way, but we plan to debrief as well. You know, after the first semester, after the second semester, because I'm sure there's something we're not, as much as I'm a perfectionist and like to do everything the right way. There's something that we're not gonna get perfect the first time, and so I do value the engagement of students. I wanna ask their opinion, what we could do better, how can we communicate, what did we think you know and you didn't know, right? And so that will all be a part of our process. So I've actually already implemented, I've had experience at a previous institution of being one of the first to implement a program like this in the state, and have helped multiple institutions implement one. So like I said, some of that has taught lessons learned, but I still can be taught from students on what we need to know. So we will be engaging them as part of that process. But of course, as always, if you ever have a student with feedback, please be happy to send them. We'd love to hear their thoughts and see what it is that, you know, what we're missing.
Very good, thank you.
Other questions or comments? I don't wanna. So one of the things that we talked about too is some of the items that you ask us to work on and engage. We've been very intentional about some of the positions that we put in place. Just recently, we've worked to rehire a payroll accountant. That was a position Lone Star used to have years ago, and it was a position during that had been eliminated. And so we've been able to bring that back. We've also had the executive director and controller for the institution. I believe, to my knowledge, that has been vacant for at least the last 4 to 5 years and had multiple, failed attempts to hire somebody, which is a key integral part of your accounting teams. So we've successfully gone through that process, and I'm pleased to say that we actually have a person starting in that role this month. So very excited to have some of those key structures back. I know that accounting may not excite everyone in the room, but the accounting role, following Gatsby, a lot of those really technical items are very important to our integrity of our institution. And so just wanted to kind of provide some highlights to you that's something we've really been working hard to get back in line and get those key positions filled this last year. Again, you heard me briefly mention it as part of our ERP. I know the board has through its actions, been very intentional about making ERP an important part of our future, and we put funds aside for that. So along those same lines, we thought it was very important to hire a commodity manager for procurement that will specialize in that. Anytime you implement an ERP, it's a very large endeavor. It can be very complicated, and we want to make sure we get that done correctly. And so it's very important for that person to be dedicated to that process. So we have started the process to get on board a new commodity manager. We are looking to hire additional CPAs in the position. Again, when I took over, we had one CPA for the system in the finance department, and they are in budget and planning. They're actually not in the accounting. So we've been very intentional. That was something that we had talked about as a group as well. And so our goal is to try to add additional CPAs for our system. Treasury function, that continues to be an item that we work very diligently on. So treasury handles all of our investments, our cash flow, our capital projects. And when if you remember when I reported last year, we had that department was down to like 1.5 FTEs this time last year. So we've really been spending time to rebuild that area. And that was either due to attrition, retirements, various change in positions. And so again, they handle our taxes, they handle a lot of key areas. And so we've really worked hard on that, and that continues to be a project for 25 and 26, because I really want to develop a cash flow model where we can actually do a better job of moving budget authority with capital projects. And that's something that we have not necessarily had the practice of doing in the past. So again, just want to make sure that you are aware of some of those key functions. We are working, which you will see in some of the G1 presentations, on an entirely new model that we hope to roll out for budget FY 27. A system of our size is our biggest advantage, but it's also our Achilles heel sometimes when it tries to implement new things. And so it really is time for us to look at a different budget model that we can roll out so that we can be more agile, that we can be able to roll with the times and be able to adapt. So we are looking at a new model, and we will be working with the campus presidents, the various vice chancellors and colleagues to actually implement a new budget model for FY 27. We are looking to redefine some of the terminology we use. We're looking to rebuild our chart of accounts. And of course, just looking at all the different ways that we can better support our students, as well as using standardized like facility use agreements. So a lot of the things that we do are just different depending on the campus. And so part of our job the last year is just trying to get everybody, swimming in the same swim lane, right? Sometimes it's just trying to get everybody at the same pool, and then get them in the same swim lane is even more important than that. But that's some of our biggest challenges that we have. And again, I know the finances and the money is not the most exciting thing, and some of the terminology is not as exciting as some of the other stuff, but it is very integral to all the things in supporting our students. So our team has really been working hard behind the scenes to get some of these things done. I always think it's important that we talk about all the good stuff we do, but also think last year, I think Chair Sullivan even asked, some of our challenges, where we needed support from the board. And so I wanted to make sure we also highlighted some of the challenges that we had. And a lot of it has to do with processes. As many of you know, many of you have been here, been involved with the system for a number of years. We had kind of a series of perfect storms, if you will. When the colleges were originally started, they each kind of got to do their own thing. And then once upon a time, then we brought them all together and said, okay, now you need to play nice and be in the same sandbox and doing the same thing. And so that's hard. And we still have some of that that we haven't quite streamlined with some of the finances. And so that's really, people are very passionate about their processes, and people very, we as humans like to own things and say like, this is my process, I don't want to change them. And so sometimes, especially when we've had folks that live here 20, have worked here 20 and 30 years, we get very tied to the way we like to do things. So some of the challenges that we see are just challenging that culture, trying to get people to think outside the box. And we're very fortunate because we have some of the most hardworking, wonderful people that are employed here at Lone Star. And that really is, they are our greatest advantage. And so just trying to get everybody to understand that some of the ways we've done business may not always be the best way to keep us going into the future. But it's been a challenge, but it's, we're working together to get that done. So.
Yeah, you mentioned historically, or, some of the processes, what we went through, a lot of it has to do with the fact that we're grown.
Right, yeah.
And what I recall from a previous meetings or when we went through this process, we had to leverage new resources, whether from state or for accountability, best practices, whatever. So that's going well, right? I mean, I know that it's
Yeah.
like going from small school, almost I can see the difference.
Yeah.
How we had to evolve, or had to move on to the next and bring in new technology and.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. We really, it's not anybody not doing what they're supposed to be or not. It was just out of a matter of practice. We grew so quickly that processes that were great for a school of 13,000 or 20,000 were manageable. When you get to 92 and 93,000 and 26, 27 locations, right? It's just, you can't manage things on spreadsheets, right? You can't have people doing shadow spreadsheets and things like that. And so a lot of it's just getting caught up and doing things in a more modernized way. But again, to your point, is we grew fast, we had Harvey, we had COVID, we had all these certain things that just kind of put us behind the 8 ball in some of the processes. But again, that's where it goes back to the gratitude for the chancellor, for the colleagues and stuff that have been really instrumental in helping us be more agile. And all of those things is just to get us to be faster so we can support students where they need us to be. So it's not a bad thing, but it is things just to make us be a little bit more agile,
Yeah,
than what we.
And to add to that, Trustee Sullivan, that's an excellent point, because I get asked all the time, right, as the fifth chancellor of this institution, sometimes people like to compare chancellors, right? So, but one of the things I always remind people is every chancellor faced a very different world. And every chancellor faced very different external and internal pressures, and every chancellor sort of faced different challenges, right? And so, the last administration really had that challenge, which was when Chancellor Head took over, Dr. Carpenter, when Dr. Carpenter took over, this institution had about 30,000 students, right? By the time Dr. Carpenter leaves, it has about 80,000. And so Dr. Head's sort of challenge as the chancellor was, we have a bunch of people who are working really hard, trying their very best, but we have systems in place that were based on sort of a 30,000 student. And so during the last administration, one of the big things that Dr. Head worked on was how do we get sort of the enterprise to match sort of that it's a system now, right? And that's really sort of now with the benefit of sort of having lived through that administration and 2 years of hindsight and then being in the seat myself, that's really, I think, what is a defining moment of Dr. Head's administration is getting the system really to evolve from a 80,000 to now, close to nearly 100. And so, yeah, and so it's just sort of part of the life sequence of any business, right? And I know we don't like to use the word business, but that's what we do here. It's a business. And so really, we're really cognizant of that it's not people not working hard, it's systems, Trustee Stoma talks about this all the time. The systems have to align with the vision, the mission, and things of that nature. And so we're very aware of that. And Chancellor Head was very aware of that as well. And as was Dr. Carpenter, all three of us kind of are aware of sort of where we are in the long progression.
Yeah, because it's a good point. If you've ever worked in food service, you got a line out the door and you've got a lot of back orders. What do? Do I cook the food to take care of everybody that's already ordered, or do I take the orders right? And so I think it's that sort of situation where it's the process can, who do you help first? I can either do the thing or I can make the thing faster. And so for a number of years, we had to do the thing, right? We had to just keep doing the thing. And so now it's trying to be intentional about having a bandwidth to keep doing the thing over here while you're also trying to improve the processes over here. So it is a constantly like back of the house, front of the house exercise. And so I just wanted to kind of share that with y'all, that continues to be a challenge, but we're starting to see that move faster and quicker and having to be able to be agile and get some of those systems to be caught up. So again, I think I've mentioned that again, because we only are successful at doing that with the support of this board, with the support of the chancellor. So everything that you do, all of the items that we talk about and bring to you are very important part of this process. So I just wanted, like I said, I would be remiss if I didn't reiterate that. Again, we already know we have a lot of limitations with our current ERP. Again, we can keep doing things over here while we try to implement a new ERP system, looking at the chart of accounts, looking at rebuilding teams and talent. Because again, some of the folks that had to do manual entry may not be the same need I have when we have a new ERP system where we need more people to analyze data or look at things differently. So all of those are challenges and obstacles that we face every day, but we continue to move through those items. So highlights of our financial position. We're very healthy. We're very fortunate. Very appreciative for all the work that this board has done throughout the years to put us in this position. We're in a very good state compared to our peers around the state. Enrollment is key. Our investments are good. We have a healthy position. We continue to look at cash flow modeling. Our year spend to date, we have about 77% of our revenue already received this year, with only about 35% expenditure. So again, that's typically in line. That's one of the slides that you all see every month during our board meeting. And I know grants have been a question before. And so just this year, we've received about 2.4 million in grants for the first quarter. And then we have 1.5 million application to the National Science Foundation for low-income students. So we're being also very intentional about the type of grants that we apply for, so that they are more student-focused in items that serve our students, especially our low-income students. So yes.
Have you taken into account or any projections as to what we're gonna face in the coming months with the turmoil in Washington?
Yeah, so we keep track of that basically every day. We get updates from our community and our federal partners to what all the goings on. The good or the bad with the grant situation was really isolated to a very hectic 36-hour period. That gave some of us more gray hair than we started with, if I can be honest with you. But most all of that settled down, because all of the, and I probably won't use the right legal terms, but all of that was basically, canceled out that day, and the action was pulled back. So now we're back to normal with grants right now. But with any administration, they can not fund grants. They can lower the funding for grants. It's something that typically in this business you will see with the change in political party, both on the federal and state. So to your point, we're not overreacting. We're handling business as usual, but we're also preparing our teams to make sure that, again, that we're intentional on the type of grants that we apply for, and that we don't necessarily apply for any soft money items that would impact our long-term success. So we want them to supplement things that we do, but may not be critical to our infrastructure. So we are fortunate, at least in that regard, that a lot of those are wraparound services and different things. But yes, we've had lots of conversations on what we would do in the case that any of those would be reduced. But I think that's just the nature of soft money. And
Do you refer to Pell Grants as soft money?
so Pell Grants were not so as in the original issues, Pell Grants were not part. So the administration came back and said that Pell Grants itself were not part of the grant freeze. I know there's been some additional conversations about Pell this week. When we were in DC a couple weeks ago, the chancellor and I, as well as the group that was there, spoke with every single House member and every single senator about the importance on Pell Grants. Not only about the amount of Pell Grants, but our Pell Grants for our students are taxable. So we had some really good conversations about that with our administrators, and we're keeping a close eye on what's going on. Not getting any indications that they are looking to not fund Pell Grants as much. They may not increase what's there. But again, anything in DC can change quickly. So that's why it's important for us to stay on top of it. And I've got updates as of yesterday, just kind of with those actions. So not sure if that's answering your question, but with Pell Grants, that would impact the institution, but we don't have any knowledge right now that that would actually come to fruition as of today.
The trustee vote, we're so on top of that. I can say we have about 450 employees that are grant funded, who are very worried about that situation because that's their pay, right?
Mhm.
And then we have about $33 million, if I remember correctly, in Pell Grant revenue. So do the math, $33 million of revenue comes to this institution. If I remember correctly, it's been about a couple of weeks since I got that number, but if I'm correct, it's about $33 million comes through Pell Grants through financial aid. Essentially, and about 60% of our students either qualify or are on financial aid. And so that was really sort of Dr. Vian, as she often does, put it very diplomatically. It was a 36 hours sort of, first we were worried about is financial aid canceled for the students. Then it became what's happening with the grant funded employees. And now it's the Pell Grants. And so it's been a very, very busy, but just to make sure we keep the conversation apolitical, that is very common every 4 years, right? Especially when there's a change in the leadership. Because I've written to the entire employees. I wrote all the employees yesterday because I was getting questions about it. Elections have consequences, as they should, right? And so if they didn't have consequences, then why would we have elections to begin with? And so every 4 years, especially when there's a party change, we have some of this where, when President Biden became the president, he said, I'm not going to fund these things. President Trump becomes the president, so I'm not going to fund these things. And, we adapt and we overcome it. So want to make sure that we don't say that it's one sort of party or the other. We do it every time there's a change.
Yeah. So again, as we're going through G1, and I don't want to steal some of the chancellor's thunder. I know some of the Gs will be discussed later, but we did successfully complete the first 3 phases of the G that we had worked on. And then the next phase for us will be, as I've mentioned, we're going to look at a new budget model. We're continuing to look at our budget forecast spend process. We're looking to continue to enhance procurement 2.0. And then again, we're continuing to look at our government an alumni relations component and how we strengthen our relationship with external partners, with past alumni to support student through mentoring and things along that line. So we continue to very much focus on G1, so much so that when I meet with my staff on the finance team and we're talking about specific projects that they're relating on, I reference which G this ties to so that it's in front of them on a daily basis, that all of the things that they're doing are working to improve all of those processes, even if it's small bites of the apple. So we continually talk about this on a daily basis. So I know we wanted to stop at 12. I've got 4 minutes. You want me to keep going
You
here?
want to keep going or? Sure, let's go.
Okay. So again, just to remind everyone, we really have 5 sources of revenue. So this is the refresher, so I don't want to go too quickly, but I want to make sure you are aware. So we state appropriations, student revenue, taxes. Now again, taxes is the largest percentage of our revenue, auxiliary, and then we have miscellaneous. So miscellaneous, I know I don't spend a lot of time talking about that in the board because it is less than 1% of our overall budget. But it really is interest from investments, fast dollars, even something like when we auction or sell things. So anytime you see that miscellaneous category, it really is just, they're kind of those de minimis things. And I hate to say de minimis because we even say this, it's hard to say like 200,000 or 300,000 is de minimis because in my household, that's not de minimis, right? I would argue that, me 20 years ago would say not 200,000 is not a small chunk of change. So it's relative to the size of our budget, right? When we're talking about millions of dollars, 200,000 or 300,000 in income for us is considered de minimis, or, sometimes a rounding error, but, it is important to look at those things. So this has always been something that has been asked as talk about percentage of budget. So again, not stuff you have to memorize, but you can have it for your records and notes. And so when you're looking at the FY 25 budget, just to remind you, we are at $513 million budget, even up from 25 from 375. So we have had tremendous growth in revenue over the last several years. But you can see that the percentage of our budgets to revenue is really kind of remained the same. So last year was local taxes were 48%. This year they're 45%, but still a significant portion of our budget is from our local tax base. Yes, ma'am.
Just a quick question.
No, please.
In the percentage, where does the federal grants fall?
So they're typically so we don't typically budget
Okay.
grants. So that's a great question. So when you get the ACFR in March at the board meeting and we go over the ACFR, a lot of times that is where we will project like our Pell Grant income or revenue or grant money, because we don't necessarily have control of that. So oftentimes what you would only see are some small amounts of grants that might come through in miscellaneous or rebates or reimbursements like FEMA, and some of that stuff may now come in as miscellaneous. But we don't typically put that in our budget authority because it's not necessarily income that we control. So that's why when you see the ACFR come out next month, that is actuals, and that it always get the question, I thought our budget was 513. This amount is far superior. And that's because we will account the ACFR for all of the sources of income that we have and not just what our income that we earn, if that makes sense. So we don't typically look at grant income as like a stream of revenue because we can't rely on it. Yes.
I'm gonna start raising my hand.
Okay, you can.
All right, so,
Allow it.
You're calling it something different than what it's been called in the past, and I wanna make sure the board knows
Oh.
that you're changing the name of something. So the document that you were just referring to is now called the,
ACFR,
and what did you used to call it?
the CAFR.
Would you like to explain to the board why we changed the name?
So it's not just a Lone Star change. I will make that note, that the accounting, the national accounting firms several years ago recognized that that was not, a very polite term in a multitude of languages. And it was actually a derogatory term as when used as an acronym like that. And so about 4 to 5 years ago, it was changed to the ACFR. So yes, it would have previously been referred to as a different name, but it's our annual certified financial report. So, but thank you. Yes. So it's the
Dr.
same
Bean?
thing. You can, yes.
It's Mike Stoma. Since you got these revenue numbers up here, something to share with you, and I can't remember if I shared this with you before. During my runoff special election, I personally visited over 350 homes out here in the Cypress District 1 area. Talked to homeowners, talked to students, talked to, parents of students. By and large, excuse me, they all want to see a reduction in taxes and another increase in their homestead exemptions. I mean, that I think if you took a poll district-wide, you'll find that that's going to be the case. And it wasn't just me that got that feedback, it was feedback to other workers that was working for me. So I just want to say, I think we should consider, no matter how small or how large, those two actions in the next budget to give these people relief out here, because everybody's still really sucking wind. So just wanted to share that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, and definitely that can obviously be something that we address as a group when we vote and we meet on the tax rates. We won't start to get the approximated tax revenues rolls until April. However, we're also along that lines continuing to monitor what's going on in Austin, as there are several bills passed on both sides of the aisle that would address additional homestead exemptions. And so we have to understand how that would play in as well. So we are continuing to monitor that on the state level from that angle on how that would impact us, as well as what we would be able to do from our local lens as well. So definitely we'll make a note of that, sir, and happy to continue to discuss that as an option for the board once we review tax rates. Sure. So I know one of the things that was asked at one of the last board meetings is to talk a little bit more about our state appropriations and the changes. So the high level of this chart, basically, when you're looking at the left and the right, is that previously the state funded us with heads and seats. This is the easiest way I can say. You bring someone in, if they're still there by the 12th class day or census, then we would get a check from the state for that amount. That has gone away. For at least Lone Star specifically, we do not get any formula funding from that method, and it is all outcomes based. So it doesn't matter who you get, it's how well you keep them. Did they get a degree? Did you give them a certificate? Did they transfer to a 4-year? And so I just want to make sure that when we talk about that, I know it's important to reiterate, but did want to make sure that you are aware of that item. Also looking at how that has impacted our state formula. We have been a huge beneficiary of the new program. Both the chancellor and I went around and thanked every one of our state representatives when we were in Austin several weeks ago and said, you know, thank you. Thank you. You know, what they're doing for community colleges around the state are tremendous. For us, we have went from approximately 83 million in state appropriations to FY25, right around 113, close to $114 million in state appropriations based off of doing the right thing for students and helping them get graduated, get certificates. So I did want you to see somewhat of a slide of that transition, as well as being able to kind of match up better what budgets to actuals were. So again, we talked about several years ago having an $8 million delta. The state appropriations this year between what was budgeted and what we actual is less than $100,000 approximately. That was different. So again, 100,000 is still a lot of money, but for the most part, it's a rounding error once you get up to the $113 million item. So I just wanted to make sure that I pointed that out to you, that we have been a huge beneficiary of that. So when you're talking to our reps and you're out in public and you're meeting with them, House Bill 8 has been a huge benefit to us, and we're very thankful for the state and continue to talk with our state legislators about the importance of that and that their job's not done. They have to continue to fully fund us. And we can talk about that if there's time, but just wanted to make sure you are aware that we have been a beneficiary of that program.
Can I ask?
Yes.
Are we following our students as they get out into the workforce and as going further in their education?
Yes, the state has set some parameters around what that looks like, and because it is tracking whether someone is getting a living wage and what that looks like within 13 months of graduation. And I do believe, I don't know if that will be discussed, part of one of our Gs also addresses checking, you know, our marketplace and seeing that we're not only graduating, but they're getting a living wage and an increase of wage once they get out. And so that is part of the House Bill program, and that we do have to report those statistics, as well as the state is validating some of that against their own database to see how well the students are, how well they're faring in the various you know, paycheck world, if you will. And then we have a chart that's based off of, you know,
And,
which
and
one are the
further,
top.
and further, school.
Yes, now
Yes, sir.
we're checking it up to a certain point, and then again, the state has several variables that they look at and how many months after graduation.
Yes, sir. So we track, and this goes back, this isn't our doing, this
Yeah.
goes back years and years, probably back to Dr. Carpenter's administration. We track how students do at the universities. And they tend to do better objectively, our students. And I was actually just meeting with students yesterday. And I was telling them that students that come from Lone Star that third and fourth year outperform students who started at those universities as freshmen. And so we're able to sort of tell parents that and tell the students that, so you're outperforming the other students, you have a lot less debt. It's a really sort of big sort of selling proposition to the students. As far as the workforce, we will talk about that this afternoon during my evaluation, because that is one of the main goals. And there's so much interest in what we're doing with G5 and our tracking that I can tell we've had both state representatives and, for example, Senator Creighton asked that when we get it to a point, they want us to come demo it for the state, and they want us to sort of share our models with them so that they can essentially make that the standard. So we're not just building it for ourselves, we're building it for the entire state.
And again, this is not something, you know, you have to study, you do have that slot in there, but this is the new variables where we get our bonus dollars for, if you were state appropriations for, that look at all of these features. And again, if a student is disadvantaged, if they are from a low income family, if it's a high demand field, to your point, I see that, you know, we get additional dollars for those items. So I just wanted to put that slide in there because I think it's come up in at least one of the board meetings where you wanted to have that information. So really just put that in there for your own performance. And if you have any specific questions, we can go through those items. But this is what these variables equate to us to the tune of $113 million. So I think, for lack of a better word, I could share that whole spreadsheet with you, but it's pretty deep. You would probably fall asleep on me if I went through all of those variables. And I know I stand between you and lunch for some things, but I just want to let you know, when you're looking at it, you're like, where did the 113? It came from a combination of these variables, depending on the various weights. So all of these things led to our $113 million in state appropriations. So when you're looking at the state appropriations, again, it continues to be a challenge just because they're budgeting us, we're forecasting, they're shoring us up in the year. This year has been a challenge because many of you have heard us say, the state because community colleges did so well, we exceeded, what they put in the appropriations biennium, by about the tune of 89.5 million. That was, I think that came out right shortly after the last board meeting, that it had gotten up to about $89 million. So that is what we're talking with the legislation about. There was testimony yesterday to this tune where we're trying to make sure that they're going to shore up the community colleges. But this continues to be a challenge because, again, if you don't hit the marks, you will owe some funds back the next year. If you do well, then you may not have had that budgeted in. So our goal is to try to get that as close to what we think it's going to be, so that we're not having to do that. We have seen some other schools have huge, tremendous swings in their forecast versus what their actuals were, which is great for some of them because they got a lot of additional dollars. But as we've learned, if we don't budget it, we can't spend it. So we're trying to estimate as close to possible, either through the state model or the model that we've done internally to try to match what we think those numbers are going to be. So that
I want to stop right there because I want to ask the board for your input, right? Because we're all in this, we're a team. And so part of what I want to ask the board is really that what Dr. Bien just talked about. I'd like some guidance from the board about, and I don't want to just sort of zip through that. So we'll make sure that we all understand the policy decision. So there's a way to say, hey, let's underestimate or conservatively estimate what we're going to get. And so then you'll have colleges that do that. And then like a few months later, and they get this huge windfall. When Dr. Bien was sharing some of these colleges with me, what I told her in a public record was, I rather guess right on the front end and not get sort of that much money on the back end, because I rather have it dialed in on the front end and not get that money. But I wanted to sort of you know, the board is a participant in this process as much as Dr. Deanne and I, and so I wanted to pause right there if we can and get feedback from the board about sort of where the board sort of feels about that in terms of what would the board like?
What are we doing about projecting our further growth and tracking how we are currently providing space and resources?
So we have, so for the first time in many, many years, we're working on a master plan literally for the facilities. Right, so that is something that Executive Vice Chancellor Johnson is working on. We have a great deal of capacity, which goes back to sort of one of the main things that I've been saying for the last year and a half, which is I think we have enough buildings. After we build Magnolia and the Victory expansion, I don't have any plans to really sort of open because we have more than enough capacity. So we're tracking that. On the student side, we could get a lot more enrollments for the most part and still have the facilities that we have without sort of adding them. So we are tracking that, but really this isn't about the front end trustee vote. It's about sort of when we represent to the THCB, would we rather forecast budget spend, which has been my position for the last year and a half, so that all three of those things align, or would we rather get a balloon? In other words, what I don't want, let me just be even more candid. What I don't want is for y'all to read in the paper, such and such college got all this money, right? And then come to me and say, Chancellor, why didn't we get the money? And then I say, well, because we did a better job of estimating, forecasting on the front end, what the money was going to be. So we budgeted it. So we didn't get sort of this balloon payment. And I want to have that conversation now because we are kind of in that situation from what I understand. We are not getting sort of this massive balloon because we've done a remarkable job, as we'll talk about more during my evaluation, compared to last year, even in forecasting. And so I wanted to just sort of stop and make sure that I have board support with that policy, because it is sort of a very fundamental policy decision about how we structure the forecasting.
Let me, if I may, pros and cons of forecasting or taking it on the back end.
Okay, Dr. Via?
Yeah, so if we don't put it in the budget, we can't spend it. And so investments is another good example that I can show you. You can actually see that play out live. For the past several years, for investments for the system, we have only budgeted somewhere around $1 million in income for investments. Because we don't control what the Fed's gonna set the rate at, right? This year, if you notice, when I got up there, like investments have killed it. We've gotten like $15 million in investments. Well, that's a $14 million gap. One of our recommendations, again, part of this conversation with the board, would be to how aggressive do you want us to be, or how close do you want me to try to truly forecast that? But then you become reliant on it. So it is, so from a pros and cons standpoint, if we increase what that number is, we have more money to spend. But you also have to have the ability to hold some back as well, that you don't allocate it out, because if you don't hit your target, then you didn't actually receive that revenue to spend, right? It could cause you to be in the deficit. So I think it really just depends on items that you have in priorities and things. So I think to the chancellor's point, as close as you can budget to actuals is preferred. That way you're not too out of line, but it just depends on if we want to be more aggressive with anything. Because if we think we're going to do well, we could leave a little bit of room in it in case we did, so we can spend it if we get it. But if I don't budget it and I don't actually put that as part of our $513 million, to the chancellor's point, even if we get it, we can't spend it. It would go into surplus, so it's not a bad thing, right? So when I say we can't spend it, we just couldn't spend it in this fiscal year. So if
under this new funding system, is there a 1-year lag? In other words, is our budget for 24-25 based upon our results from 23-24?
So it's changing. So I will tell you, this past year, what we got in that year was a lag for the 3-year rolling average. What the state is trying to get to is in the same year, they're shoring up what actuals. So like we would get an estimate this summer, what they think this next year will be. However, in February, if we actually did better, that's where like the chancellor said, a lot of schools are getting those bonus checks, if you will, because they did better than what they predicted they would. So they're trying to shore us up in the same year.
And some people may owe.
Yeah, and some people may owe,
That was my
yes,
next
and they do owe. And so several of them, again, I could share that spreadsheet. It is public document that is like, you know, this so-and-so is down $600,000. Now, for that model, the state actually shores you up the following year. So it's kind of it's a catch-22. So there are pros and cons to both, and it really just depends. I like to be as close as possible, but I also think with some of the changing models, it may be beneficial. If you think you're going to do a little bit better, to at least project that and then not allocate those funds out. You could hold those back until you receive whether you got them or not. But that's really just an investment philosophy that the board would have to tell us what you prefer. Because again, anything we earn would go into surplus. We don't lose it. We just can't spend it in that physical year.
And that would be our recommendation, subject to the board's approval, obviously, but that's the recommendation of the chancellor and the CFO is that that's what we do because it's just cleaner, in my opinion. It's just cleaner, but I wanted to sort of highlight because, you know, we're sitting here giving you this presentation and we want to make sure that y'all feel like y'all are participants in this process, right? And we need your feedback. And so we want to make sure that when we're doing things, we're doing it consistent with the elected officials of this institution.
So this is Mike Stoma. Can you hear me?
Yes,
sir.
go ahead.
I would agree with your approach on this. In the business world, that's essentially what they require within a tolerance, maybe, you know, which your tolerance is plus or minus 10%. But if you don't hit that, you know, if you don't hit within your projected budget, whether it be revenue and or expenditures, that's seen as bad management. That's judged as bad management. So I would agree with your policy. You should closely estimate what revenue and expenditures are. And since you're tracking this, Dr. Vienna, over time, you will know at some point when there's going to be a windfall or a shortfall. At that point, that's where you need to bring the board in to inform them, have options to how to deal with both.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments?
You mentioned projecting studies as to further growth.
Yes, sir.
Are we including growth of the size of the district?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Population growth aligned with.
And not population, geographic and footprint
Of the district?
of the district.
No, sir. They're 2,700 square miles, in my opinion, and recognition for the board is more than enough. And that's been sort of one of my big recommendations
Okay.
to the board over the last year and a half is we've got to take care of the 2,700 square miles that we have before we add 2,800 or 2,900 or 3,000. We have enough work to do, in my opinion, with the 2,700. And also just put my legal hat on for just a second. Our expansion is constrained by statute. So you can't really just take over territory without encroaching on the territory of another community college.
Can we encroach on more on can we get more full degree? I mean,
Yes, sir. So that's one of the things that we're working on, and it's part of my presentation this afternoon. I actually have a map that resembles a risk board, and so that's this afternoon.
Okay.
And we're gonna talk about sort of the ideas there. Because one of the things that I want to be really clear, I don't believe in geographic expansion. And I don't think that my chancellorship, subject to the board's agreement, of course, will be one of geographic expansion. We've had about 17 years of geographic brick and mortar expansion. And so I think now it's about value proposition attractiveness. Can we get people that live in other service areas to drive by their colleges that are local to come to ours? Can we get people that don't live in our service area to sign up for an online class and compete on value proposition rather than geographic physical location, because there's also substantial overhead that goes along with sort of physical brick and mortar locations. And so I think the future is value proposition driven rather than geographic boundary driven.
What about going into the, a full bachelor's degree program
So we have 4 of them, sir.
I know.
And we're about to get a 5th one in teaching.
in teaching?
Yes, sir. Teaching is the 5th one that we're working on. And that's part of my presentation.
Okay.
This afternoon.
Okay,
During my evaluation, but, yes, sir. And we tried really hard to not sort of step on each other's toes, so I want to make sure that, but yes, sir. During my evaluation, we will talk about what the extension plans are.
okay.
It is legislatively driven as well. You
Yeah,
can't just
yeah.
wake up on Thursday and go, I wanted 5 more degrees and plan on implementation of the degree programs. And with respect to geographic expansions, in my opinion, it is politically risky. And we've been able to, in the past, prior to Chancellor Castillo being here, we've gone up to the line politically when we didn't need to go to the line. I think that, as he has explained it to us as well in closed session, I assume, we can do very well with what we have if we do it better.
Yes.
And I think that's where we're headed. We have the resources, we have the students, we have the facilities, we have the geography, all those things are there. Now it's time to maximize them. And I think that's probably where the board will agree with this goal. It's assuming I hadn't seen them, so this is not, it's just an assumption based on having worked with him now for a year and a half.
And that directly aligns with the new formula for the state, because if we graduate more, paying more, we will simply earn more on the students we already have, prior to expanding. So the good news is that new formula works in our favor, with retaining those students, so. Okay. So this is just a timeline, again, for you to have for your purposes. Christina Maria, it talks a little bit about the settling out, programs, and talks about when they would settle up and adjust us. So I provided that for you so that you could see that the program is meant to be, more dynamic. And to Trustee Kane's point, it's, you know, when we're looking at the dynamic adjustment, it kind of highlights what that would look like there for you. So if you have questions about that, please let me know, but this kind of defines their period. So we have been going from a 3-year average, and now we are just now moving into what they're considering more dynamic. Again, has pros and cons to it, because it will change in your physical year. And then there was one college just recently that got about $13 million difference in their adjustment period, and some that are going to owe funds back. So again, both of those comes with its own set of challenges, both of which I'm very excited that we don't have to deal with. So, all right. So this is looking at our state revenues. This is looking at what we have from fall 23, 24, and 25. And we would not be recommending, even though the previous strategic plan would have called for an increase. So just to kind of put that in front of you, previous board would have recommended another increase in tuition this year. The chancellor and I talked about that internally, and agreed that it was not the correct time for that, and we didn't necessarily need that for any of our strategic goals. And additionally, the state has put in some freeze for the other state schools. But even prior to that, we had looked at making the recommendation to you all that we not increase tuition and fees for students this year. So I did want to stop and pause at that point. And again, make sure you all are aware of that our recommendation would be not to increase tuition for our students this year, even prior to the state coming out with their recommendations. So we.
I'm sorry.
We keep talking over each other. I apologize. We're both thinking is what we're doing. And, please, and then I'll.
Sorry, sir. If you're presiding over the meeting, I should wait. I'm sorry. So, and the board will recall that we had a student come and actually advocate that, right? So going back to a consistent theme throughout my chancellorship is that when people come and speak at that lectern as part of citizen or public participation, we do try to internalize that. So y'all remember we had a young man that was going to Texas A&M, and he said, hey, on behalf of the students, if we could keep tuition at the same rate. So yes, Dr. Vian and I had already agreed that we weren't going to raise tuition for students even before the governor came out and asked state and public institutions not raise tuition on students.
And I think, you may have asked this before, but I wanted to put this in there because one of the student had brought up the issue that we had increased tuition at a higher rate. So I did want to bring this slide to your attention and pause here for just a moment to make sure you understand that, that while I respect, the concern and we heard the student, we're not going to raise tuition and fees. I did want to make sure you had a truer picture of what our tuition increases have been. Part of the differential was the flattening of fees that a number of years ago, the Board of Trustees voted to eliminate fees. And so you can see that that happens, it starts to level out in 2020, where we go from the 37 credit hour fees that are in there and we get rid of those. So a lot of the change in tuition from 42 to 111, if you don't have all the facts, does not give you all the true picture of what went on. So our tuition has not relatively gone up as a percentage, but when you look at those fees being rolled in, that can skew the numbers. So I did at least want to present you all with the facts so that when you're in your communities and you're talking to your constituent groups and your community members, that you have a true understanding of how we handled that and why you might have seen a change from $42 to 111 and what really made up those differential. Because as you can see, relative to value, in 2015, we were charging $938 for 12 hours. And now we're charging $1332, which still compared to our peers is still a significant value and not as high of an increase as if you just look at the 42 to 111 without understanding that student fees were rolled into there. So.
Comment I'd like to toss out, and maybe I'm listening too closely to your words, is that I don't think we want to give the impression that since the student
Oh, no, you're right.
came to the board, made a request, that we took certain action. So just want to say that, because then next board meeting, you could
That's
have
right.
another student
Yeah, I
requesting
understand.
something
Yeah.
with the full expectation of it being carried out because
Yeah.
the student requested it the month before. And these are board policy decisions.
Mhm.
And the board needs to take information from our respective constituents and from the administration and then make the decisions. And that's what you're laying out to us
Yes,
today.
sir.
Here's the information. Now it's up to us as a board collectively to decide yes, no, modify. I just want you really clear that no individual coming to a podium at a public meeting should expect
Correct.
to have their way.
Yeah, no,
Yes, sir. I
that's a good point.
apologize if I gave that impression.
Yeah, no, and I think I wanted to bring this slide to your attention because some of the data that the student did share would be corrected in here. So really my comment was more so just to bring this to you all, just to be timely. And yes, we were really addressing the board policy because the recommendation in the strategic plan that I had received was a recommendation that there were multiple years of increases. And even as early as last fall, the chancellor and I had a conversation that based on all the factors of going on that we would not recommend it. So that would be our recommendation. Of course, we would, advise to the desires of the board, should we go in a different direction. But at this time, we do not think tuition and fee increase would be warranted for us.
And I think that looking ahead to 25, 26, it's great to freeze it. Was there any discussion about rolling it back to the 23, 24 level?
No, sir, I've not had any internal conversations around that.
Just wonder what impact that would have. Overall.
So to go back to Chair Sullivan's comments just a few seconds ago, right? So, state appropriations, it's kind of in the air right now, especially in light of sort of a letter that Senator Creighton sent yesterday. And so now we're not raising tuition. And we also have a recommendation from a trustee just during this very meeting to lower the property tax rate and and if you go back to the circles, there's not many slices on that pie left once you lower tax rates.
Yep.
And you have a higher homestead exemption, you don't raise tuition, and then state appropriations in mind that came through and then, so I guess my point is to echo sort of my acknowledgement of what Chair Sullivan just said. It's up to the board, which slice essentially gets the attention, but I don't think it's fiscally possible to lower tuition, not have state appropriations go up, and lower the tax rate and increase the homestead exemption. I don't think we can do all three.
And I'm sorry. And just with the, as far as the homestead thing, we did give an increase recent, like
Yeah, and I have-
a year and a half ago, maybe. So I'm in agreement. At this point, we need to see what's gonna go on with the state. You know what I'm saying? We come in at the behest of, is the state gonna do what they say they're gonna do, or they gonna change the rules in the middle of the game, and now we gotta try to figure it back out. So with that homestead thing, I know people who have seen a difference in their property tax. So I know it's working, it's just a slow go. You know what I mean? So we gotta be careful how much we're giving.
And, you know, again, to the chancellor's point, I'm happy to run any performer that you all have, or you want to see the various scenarios. That will be part of, you know, our overall process, but again, there's only so much, you know, pie that we can shrink and
That's
still do the things that you want us to do, but any of those things can be taken under advisement.
I have one additional comment, if I may, and that would be to ask the chancellor to explain how any of those potential modifications and slices of the pie, forgive me, would be affected by board policy and the ratios that are in board policy. The
Yes,
percentages.
so Dr. Vian, if you will go back for me to the pies as we're referring to them, the circle grass. Okay, so if a few years ago, there was a board policy that was passed by the board administration that really sort of set, and I think if I remember correctly, I think Chancellor Head would have said that there were aspirational.
And I do have that slide in
Right,
there.
and so there's a slide apparently later on where Dr. Vian is prepared to talk about that. But the board kind of set these parameters. Now, one of the things that we've learned, and Dr. Vian, jump in here because you are the expert, is that it's actually not technically feasible to comply with that board policy section in the long term. Eventually you would, if I remember correctly, eventually you would have to ask students to pay because the population is growing far fast. Dr. Vian, take it away. Tell us what the issues are with that.
Yeah, so actually I have that in there and we can come back to that as well. But really it's not, we would have to increase our tuition so much that we would, in my opinion, start to lose students. Because it's not the value add. And so I have this slide in there because it is something that the board needs to look at because the policy B.1.3b actually says that you will equalize those. And the whole thought was that those two things would be equal, that the taxpayers and the students would pay an equal share. But because tax property rates are growing, house values are increasing, that would have to be done at such an exponential rate. That I do not think that would be ever something I would recommend because it would be detrimental to our students and our community. And it have an unintended consequence, if you would. So
You would not be doing it to raise revenue or offset increases because it would just be to
equalize them for the sake of.
equalize the slices of the pie.
Yeah.
It's not for money.
Right, and that's what, it's an unintended consequence of a good theory, of a good thought, but we don't necessarily, it would have to increase so much exponentially
Okay.
that you would start to lose students, so, and so I do.
think that needs to go to policy committee to actually look at. I mean, as we look at cleaning things, modernizing, you know, our business, would that be appropriate, Chancellor, or?
Yes, sir. So
Or would it be an
because-
exercise?
No, sir. Because it was what I understood at the time, a board initiated policy change and to be respectful of the board's role in governance. Dr. Vian added it. Essentially, you kind of got a little bit ahead of us today because that was part of her presentation was to ask exactly for what you just recommended. So we agree with that.
Yeah.
Don't let me
No,
take
you're
your
fine.
momentum away because it's.
I just wanted to make sure we agree with that. I do not think that would be to the benefit, and I'm always going to err on the protection of the system, but then the students, right? And so that would have too many unintended consequences, but I think it was.
Okay, thank you.
I'll definitely-
Your guidance
Yeah,
during those meetings.
yeah, I mean, I think it's good to say that you want people to have an equal share at the pie, you know, and I think that was the intent is that everybody has skin in the game, for lack of a better word. But I don't think that is too far, it would put us too far out of whack and it would not be beneficial, so. Because then you would potentially, again, impact enrollment, and then if property taxes came down, then you'd have to, you know, it's just a constant shift, so. So again, I will go back a couple slides just so you can see, that, But again, we just showing where we are, that we are still low to the middle of the road. And a lot of these are just for your intensive purposes. We update these each year, so you have, true, sense of where we are with the state median. So the red line is the state median amongst our peers, and then we are at least 2 slots to the left of that. So we are still to the low end of the value. Again, just having that data that you can share when you're out in your communities, just something that you would have to see that we are still far below. And this is compared to a 12-hour semester credit ratio. So, and then again, looking at, this is the out of district. That is intentionally that way, because we intentionally want to be of value to our taxpayers. So just want to make sure if anybody ever sees that, we get that question a lot. Why don't you charge less for out of district? You could get more students, to your point, right? But ideally, that is where our property taxes owners do pay the largest stake of our, and so there has to be value for them, right? Or you have bigger disagreements about property tax statements and things along that line. So we just want to make sure that you are still aware that that is very much intentional and as a value to our payees in our tax district, as well as looking at out of state and then international. So, and this does start to allude to the tax rate. I don't know if this is a good place to pause. I think we went a little past our time, but when we talk about voter rates, it does show what our current tax rate is. And it does show the preference between the M&O, or the difference between the M&O and the INS rates and what we charge and how we get to that. And again, with state legislators actively looking at this with a no new tax rate policy in effect, our tax rate can swing. And I do have a slide that will get into some of those details here momentarily. So don't want to go too fast, but I know wanted to at least show you how we make up our 0.1076 tax rate. That again is right now we would be recommending, if all factors come in the way we think, that we would hold on the tax rate, especially until we know what's going to come out of Austin.
These are really good examples.
Mhm.
I'm serious, groceries, utilities, minor, you know, versus mortgage, home renovation,
Right.
major appliances. So
Yeah. And we get asked a lot, why can't I just use this part of the bucket to pay on this? And the buckets can't cross. It's like oil and water, if you will, right? We cannot use one side of the bucket, and we can only use M&O for operatings. And so sometimes when people see our INS side of the house, then they'll say, well, why can't that be used for salaries? Why can't that be used to give scholarships? That is just not legislative plot. That is just a big no-no. So those are examples of what we can use versus what we cannot use for the various rates and how we get to this. Now, we can shift between those buckets with some things, but we can't move money from one pot to the next. Yes, sir.
As we talked a little bit earlier, that we don't think we're gonna be needing money to build more buildings right away or take on additional landscape. How are we looking at our debt retirement? We're gonna continue to,
Yeah, so would love to go in more depth with you all. We are eventually going to run out of runway, on our INS side. We do have about, $7.5 million in revenue bond payments on our books that we pay from the O&M. That could be potentially, it would have to require board approval and voter approval to do what they call a penny swap, to move some of those revenue bonds off of our O&M over to the INS side, which would not increase anything to our homeowners. But once we get to a certain point, if we don't issue new bonds, or if we don't have something there, it will force us to lower our rate. And that is not necessarily what we want to get to as well. So there's probably in the next 2 years, maybe sooner than that, we're going to have some real deep conversations about tax rate and bonds. And even if we're not building new, maybe that bond issuance is for rehabbing what we currently have. That is something that we are going to have to sit down and have a long conversation about what that looks like, because we will probably need to defease again this year in order to not exceed the no new tax rate. But we will run out of room eventually on what we can defease. And so we have low debt, but it will eventually, be something we will need to look at.
And just to give the board some concrete next steps that we were already looking at this, before today, Dr. Vian brought this up to me in the fall, really towards the end of the semester. And so we've already started our preliminary discussions. We were waiting on the election. Then we were waiting on the appointment of the new Audit and Finance Committee, which is the same as the old Audit and Finance Committee. And I think that the Audit and Finance Committee is meeting in March. Dr. Vian is slated to come present to the Audit and Finance Committee exactly this topic, with the goal of getting it to the full board probably sometime in April, May, to discuss this very particular issue, because it is very complicated and very detailed, and so that's where we are. So we'd be happy to invite you to that committee meeting, trustee Bo of the Audit and Finance Committee. And then that's where this is going to be discussed in great detail, probably in the next 6 weeks.
Yes, it is something that we need to look at. So.
What is our total bonded indebtedness?
I can pull that figure. I don't know right off the top of my head without the last defeasance, because we've defeased, at least 2 tranches lately, and would need to, I want to say, I'm going off from memory somewhere. I mean, we have paid it off substantially early. I want to say there's about $90 million in revenue bonds and maybe 30 million in outstanding, but I would prefer to give you that, and I'll bring that to y'all. I can get that before you're done today.
And about how much each year do we try to pay down?
I can get you all that
Okay.
information. Yeah, sorry, off of memory, I would be
Okay.
speculating. So if you don't mind, I'd rather give you those actual figures. So.
I'd like to see them.
Yeah, I will provide those to the whole board. I'll get you what we have in revenue bonds as well as O&M bonds and what we pay on that note. So,
Dr. Vian, just get them to Ms. Barnett. Ms. Barnett will
Okay,
answer the
happy
entire
to, yeah.
board. Thank you.
If I remember, I had made a request to see if we have looked into solar. Has anything come of that?
I will, I know we are looking at, generators now and generator, usage and auxiliary dollars from that. And we have looked at some solar items. We are doing several energy efficiency programs across, the buildings to look at those things. And we do have we have a person who's actually dedicated to energy and utilities. And we're looking at a couple schematics. If there's something specific you want to see, we can show you that. But, we've looked at what it would cost us to do like solar panels on top of some of the buildings and things like that, to generate solar power. And right now, some of those have not been cost efficient, but I'm happy to look at something specific or provide you some other details if there's something specific you want to look at. So we've been looking at all energy savings through LED lightings, new projects, even, ABC Johnson and her team are looking at water conservation. So we're looking at lots of different ways that we can save, and also looking at solar and where we could implement that or if it would be cost effective. So, and right now we've not been something we've implemented, but can definitely get you some more details. If there's something specific you'd like us to look at, we can review that.
Trustee Vogt, what are you trying to accomplish? And by that, I mean, are you trying to save money? Are you trying to be green? What are you trying to do by asking that, especially twice? What do you want to see?
I want to see if we are overlooking something that's green and something that's going to save the district money.
So we'll definitely give you some rundown though, but we are definitely switching items over to save energy, water, those sort of things. And then we're looking at some others, but we will follow up and share with some of our plans.
Yes, sir. We will get you a written report. You will not have to ask a third
Yes, sir.
time. I apologize.
So just taking a look at this would show you based off of this year's, the past tax rates for the past years. And I know we were talking about it earlier that we did just recently lower the rate from 10.78 and 10.76. This is showing you again, more than likely this year, based off of the trends, that there will likely need to be another defeasance again this year. Without a defeasance, we would be forced, based on the no new tax, to lower our rate as low as 0.966, which again, in a market downturn or a downturn in the housing economy could be also detrimental that we, would lower our rate. So we are looking at that and we'll bring all of those documents and figures once we have a greater sense of what the tax rolls would look like. And again, those preliminaries start to come in April, for you all, but happy to answer any questions about that that you may have now or in the future, but just showing you some estimates about what it would look like, based on what we're currently trending at. Again, total tax rate, for the maintenance is 0.0757, interest and thinking is 0.039, and then again, just showing you a different way that, estimated without the fees, and like I said, would cause us to have to lower our tax rate, so. Based on FY 25 budgeted revenues versus forecasted, we did think that we would probably get a little bit less in taxes. But the tax rolls are coming in a little bit about 2% higher than what we budgeted, based off of, what we're seeing from, them this year. So that's a good problem to have, but again, 2% of our largest factor can shift our budget. So it's always good to be on the positive as opposed to the negative. But the tax rate and the tax rolls is sometimes the hardest thing to judge because we are reliant on the market conditions and what we anticipate will happen in the house sales in the market and then what we actually have. We still good? Do we want to keep trudging through? I want to be respectful of the board and lunch.
How much more do you have?
Couple more slides, sir, but it may be, it'll probably be the,
Couple as in two?
no, sir.
You need a few then.
I have a few, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
You had some more than
Sorry,
three.
but I just.
Anybody interested in a restroom break and?
Lunch.
stretch the legs
Right,
real
yeah,
quick?
rest- like a 10-minute.
Yeah, could we do that?
Okay.
Oh, you gonna dismiss the recording? You gonna stop?
Yeah. You want to excuse yourself, right?
Oh,
Yeah, so let's go ahead. I mean, let's take a couple of minutes.
We're taking a couple of
okay,
minutes.
I didn't know you had to do something since we on.
I'm just gonna stay here, so.
Okay,
But we are taking a recess.
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
We're just taking.
The board is recessed.
Okay. I'm like, I didn't know.
Recess.
For the FY 26 year, just to note that that may be a difference that you see, that we would like to better forecast that as opposed to underestimating.
Yeah, the $5 million doesn't mean we're gonna get $5 million more, does it? It means it's 5 million in taxable value.
It could be, no, it actually may mean we may receive 5 million
$5 million
more
more,
than we thought.
okay.
Yes, sir, based on the taxable values, but the actual revenue to us would be a net of about 5 million, again, compared to where we're trending right now. And we use that based off of, the actuals that they give us, and, what those files look like they're gonna come in, but again, they can always shift. It's still very low as a percentage of what we receive, but still 5 million is $5 million, so. Yes, sir. Okay, any questions on that? I do want to go through, again, we've already gone over the board policy. Our recommendation is that we look at that. Again, I want to remind you all, cash reserves right now is 169. This is something, again, that we would like to work with Audit and Finance Committee going forward. The definition that has currently been used for reserves is an economic definition. It is basically when you see 129, I know that most of you probably expect to see that reserve dollar change each month. It does not change each month because it is based on the definition approved by the system, is that cash reserve is the short and long-term balance at the lowest point in a physical year. So it is very much an economic economic definition, if you will, and not necessarily the state. We have far more than that in our savings account, for lack of a better word, but because you're only seeing where we hit the lowest point in a year, that is where the 169 comes from. So when you get your financials, we're actually showing you, you will see that there's a pool balance of 560 million. You'll see different pockets, but the 169 comes from an economic definition. So when you don't see that slide change every month, it's not because I didn't think to update it, but based on the definition, it only changes once a year.
Is that because of policy or is that an economic, I mean, not economic, a financial like Gatsby type?
It's not a Gatsby rule. It was kind of the standard that the board adopted. My understanding was a number of years ago, and we were gonna bring you forward maybe a different definition to consider. I don't know that it's in policy, but it was my understanding that it was brought to the board as an agreed upon definition.
It's an operation.
Was it based on any of the current events?
No, really, I mean, it's like many things, you can have different folks that think a definition is better than the other or a use. It's not a wrong definition. It's just most time when you hear cash reserves, you think about how much money we have in our savings account. And an economic division is what is the lowest point of income for us at any given year? And for us, that hits somewhere around December. And the reason being is because we've already collected fall. We've paid payroll. We don't collect student revenue again until the spring, and we haven't started collecting taxes. So some of that we're using savings, if you will, to front our cash flow until we get our next tranche of taxes, and then we're back on the positive. So it's not a wrong definition. It's just a definition that looks at our cash flow modeling more so than it does a savings account, if you will. And it doesn't make it wrong. It's just sometimes the definition doesn't match up to what people think it should look like. So I just wanted to highlight that for the board to make sure you are aware is when I show that slide that dollar doesn't change. Does that help answer your question?
Not really, because, I would think it would change over a period of time.
Yeah, the definition that was agreed upon was the lowest point in that previous fiscal year of where we were. So we have to take a look back and say, what was the lowest amount of cash we had on hand at any point during the year, the last year, and that was 169. Now, that could have been their lowest point, and we could have gotten $40 million the next week in income. And now we're back at 200 million in reserve. It was just the lowest point. Basically, if you think of it like your own checking account, like right now is the last day of the month. So like tomorrow, you're gonna get a new influx, but today, your cash reserve is based off of like today because you haven't gotten paid all month, right? So like this might be the lowest point that your checking account gets all month because it's the last day of the month, right? So that's kind of what it's using is like that lowest benchmark.
Okay, I thought it carried from year to year the same
Each
thing.
year, it just kind of goes and we look at what our lowest cash flow was the previous year.
All right.
And that's what they base it off of. All right, other questions, please stop me and ask. Want to go through that when we're looking at bonds. Again, we continue to reconcile and look at our bonds. When we started looking at our bonds and bond projects, a lot of reconciliation was still needed. We still have remaining bonds on our books that we still need to spend. We're working very closely with EDC Johnson on that. We will probably have to pay some financial dollars back to the IRS this year because we've had too much money in bonds sitting earning interest. That's not a bad thing. That's not a penalty. We didn't do anything wrong because the interest rates are so high and we haven't spent the bonds fast enough that there's some rules. So when I have to come to you and mention to you that we have to pay some money back to the IRS, it's not necessarily a bad thing. We have the money sitting in the back. It's interest that's earned, but according to the federal government, we've earned too much interest. So just want to make sure that you are aware of that, that you may see that coming down the pipeline, that we have to let you know about that. And talk a little bit about this briefly, that we're going to recommend to Audit and Finance that we visit some about a potential penny swap to get those bonds off of our revenue side. That would free up close to $7.5 to $8 million on our operating each year to do other things. So I've already showed that slide, just putting that in there with our state appropriations. So with our state appropriations and looking at FY26. So prior to now, we've been talking about the past year. So now we're actually kind of start to kind of give you a prequel, if you will, to next season. and looking at the new funding. So we estimate for FY '26, so next year's budget, state appropriations are gonna increase about 7.2 million. Tuition and fees would be nothing necessarily. Now, that's not anticipating growth. With the board's discretion, we can increase or look at growth, but that was projecting no new income from fees and no new growth. So that again could fluctuate if we have another record enrollment, that number could allocate. That goes back to the chancellor's question is how conservatively we want to budget. Property taxes could reach an additional 15 million this year. And again, my recommendation is that we actualize and realize all the investment income. And that would be about 15 million more in auxiliaries for a total of new funding available for FY '26 of $37 million. Our recommendations for where that would be spent for FY '26, given your support and approval, it is looking at a 3% across the board for our employees would cost us about $9 million. We've worked closely with HR to try to get as close to that as possible. And we anticipate that across the board of 3% would cost us about $9 million, but would be a priority of the system to continue to help us get to the inflation. So even though you may hear that CPI is actually a little bit lower. Oh,
We go back, please.
yes, sir.
And I don't know, were you still talking about this?
Yes, I was gonna show it to you. Go ahead.
No, if you're going
Yes.
somewhere, then I want to come back. I have a couple of questions.
Okay, yeah, go ahead and ask.
Okay, so the minimum $1,200, would that apply to all employees? And what's classified as an employee? Part-time faculty, full-time staff? I mean, what's
Yeah,
that?
yeah, so what we'd say is because if you look at 3% across the salary, that a minimum that we would get, so even if 3% of someone's salary wouldn't equal 12, a minimum would be given of that for everyone. So someone could potentially get a higher percentage because maybe if they're only making $30,000 or 20,000, a lower salary range, that 3% would not equate to that value. So as a minimum, regardless of their salary, we would give at least those individuals a $1,200 increase in their salary.
How does that affect adjunct compensation treated differently or not?
We would look at potentially having increase for, this didn't include adjuncts. This faculty received theirs.
Other discussion?
That would be a different discussion if we look at, this was just for, looking at our full-time, staff. Last year, you remember, we did a increase for, faculty that was substantially higher. So this is just across the board for, looking at our, full-time employees.
Could you go back one slide? All right, so I think I'm okay saying this. I had a discussion with you and the chancellor, maybe when y'all were driving back from Austin. There was talk about a potential $16 million increase in revenue. Does that ring a bell? Or am I off on
So the
something?
16 million was to try to make us whole for this year.
Okay.
I believe, sir. That was the 16 million was for this year that we were hoping that they would make up. We're currently short in appropriation 16 millions from what was budgeted this year. So in FY '25's budget, which could potentially affect FY '26 if they don't fully fund the appropriation based on the coordinating board's recommendation. Does that answer your question or?
It does, but it creates like a dozen more.
Okay, go ahead. That's what this is.
So if we don't get that 16 million,
Mhm.
then how accurate is this? And if we do get the 16 million, what impact would it have on this? And would it be called new funding or called something funding that we could not rely on going forward?
Okay, so let me answer that in a couple different ways. So this year, 16 million, what the state allocated to us was $113 million. I'm gonna go back real quickly to this slide. The
Yes,
113 million is what the state told us they would give us. The 16
And
million,
that's because it's forecast, not actual. So
That's
forecast? Okay.
but the 16 million we're trying to get is in this figure. Because what the state said is, we didn't actually have enough money in the bank to pay you what we told you you've earned.
Okay.
So a combination of the state coffers is short $89.5 million from what they told us they would pay. So if we don't get 16 million, that means they only gave us in $97 million in appropriations, and we potentially could be short this year. Now, but if you remember, the last 2 years, we've been able to roll money into an ERP, right? Because we had budget authority. So we could potentially still be okay because we've been very conservative. but the 16 million we're after is sitting in this year's budget. So to your point, if we don't get that 16 million, then yes, that would be 16 plus 7, so we'd be short 23, which would mean we only have about 14 left to do. So does that answer?
That, yes, that gives me, now I can understand. Just want to make sure we all kind of know too.
Yeah, no, that's what this whole thing is about,
Because
sir.
if
So
we walk away, everybody walks away from the table right now. We're thinking we have 37 million bucks. Estimated in funds that is dependent upon
correct.
certain actions.
Yeah.
So. Me, it's almost like an asterisk.
Yeah, correct. So to change.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even as early as yesterday afternoon, there were some emails that, again, with state appropriations, it, you know,
Right, it's very fluid. I
Yes, sir.
understand. But I just want to make sure that
No.
anyone that doesn't, anyone that takes this at face value might interpret it differently once they see the actual results.
yeah, no, sir, it's a very good point. I'm glad you brought it up to everybody, because again, I live in it every day, study it, talk to the folks, and it's still, it can be a lot to absorb. So I think that was a good call. So does that,
And that goes to another sort of I want to make sure that the board is supportive of the internal policies of the institution. And that is that Dr. Dean and I have agreed, and I've explained to the faculty and staff of the entire system multiple times. It's a strategic decision to not use increased HBA funding
That's
in
right.
anything that we could not cut, or in anything that really ties to employees' pay or programs that we wouldn't. So when we give people internally money, we tell them very clearly now, this is HPA increased money. So it might not be there next year. We may not get it because we're very cognizant of the idea that it is an asterisk, right? It's projected, it's been promised to us, but until it hits the bank account, Dr. Vian and I don't consider it real. And I just wanted to make sure the board was supportive of that, because that's not how everyone, and to be fair, because one of the points that in our legislative visits, one of the representatives corrected me on this, and I want to sort of honor that I did internalize that. That's a privilege.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of community colleges in the state that don't have the luxury of not using that money for core operations. And so some colleges that do have that privilege are using it for what I consider to be hard programs to get rid of. They're creating entitlement programs. And it's going to be very difficult if the funding model changes for those chancellors and those presidents to then take those things back.
Don't think you're taking something
Yeah.
away.
Right.
We're taking it away. They just had some extra.
Yeah.
Correct. And so we're being very mindful of spending it on things like, for example, $1 million of professional development to faculty. We have it this year. Make sure you use it, because next year there may not be $1 million in professional development for faculty. And so we're being very mindful of the fact that yes, there is an asterisk, and I just wanted to make sure that the board was supportive of that, because again, when you read in the paper, HBA funding is being used to do things. I get questions, for example, like, why aren't you offering free community college to all the high school seniors? Well, what happens if that funding goes away? And I've got seniors that made plans to come to, you see what I'm saying? And so I just wanted to make sure, any feedback from the board on that front?
I think we're aligned with you, and these are annual or biennial?
for
You're-
payments,
No, the projections.
this would be the annual, this would be for the entire year.
Okay.
So, yeah, so, cost of living, again, would run us around 9 million of the 37 projected. And again, just showing you here that even though we've seen CPI start to decline, that the whole point of this chart is to tell you that even though we've tried to be consistent and supportive of our employees, that we still haven't quite been able to keep up with inflation. So even though inflation is a little bit down right now, we're still recommending 3% just to kind of keep everybody caught up from the years where it was far exceeded what we could allocate in an across the board compensation adjustment. So the second new initiative that we will be proposing for the budget, with the board's support, is funding for a new Magnolia Center. We anticipate that the operating budget for that, new center will probably be around, 3.5 million, maybe a little bit less. But what we're looking at for FY '26 is about 50% of operation based off the fact that we would get substantial completion in December. And of course, we hope that they are fully packed from day one, but may not necessarily be realistic. So we're allocating approximately $1.5 million prorated for the budget for personnel and non-personnel operating expenses to operate that center.
What is EHLS, please? Where from the bottom?
On the PD vehicle.
What would be an example of that? Would that
Like
be
right here,
recurring? Would that be recurring or is that one time?
those are usually, let's see, non-personnel, those are repairs. Those are usually, so they're recurring in the sense that we usually have repairs and things of that nature, but EHLS items, the way they work usually, because that used to be one of my former divisions. We have inspection, sir, and then people will come and red tag different, you know, and then there's a cost usually for those repairs, different things, and so EHLS is like the fire hydrants, the defibrillators, those items.
Who has Magnolia? Whose district is that?
Right now that is Tomball, and that is, I'm sorry, it's
Okay.
Montgomery, and it's Trustee.
Yeah.
Okay. Congratulations.
Okay. Questions about that? I wanna,
Thank
we're
you.
super excited about that center and super excited about, and again, these numbers are pretty close to what we have, but again, they could fluctuate, but where we are right now, that's what we're anticipating for that budget.
We go back.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the bottom says PD equipment maintenance after 1 year reduces to 52,520. But the equipment startup is only 20. Oh, I see cost per unit. I'm sorry, never mind. I see. I was looking at cost per unit, not line item total.
Okay.
Sorry.
No problem. They're good questions. And again, to get to these figures, we did ask each respective vice chancellor for the needs of their areas and what they would take. And so again, there may be something, we tried to capture all the things, but this is the general idea of what we think we'll need for startup that's not already included in the capital project itself.
And just so, I want to make just a public statement about a couple of things. One, I do serve still even as the chancellor, as the police commissioner. That's why I have my laptop out. I'm dealing with that situation that we discussed in closed session. But I'll tell you that, the PD equipment startup, I can tell you exactly what it is. Sir, it's police radios. It's police radios, the uniforms, and et cetera for the new officers. A police radio tends to be about $10,000. And as an example, the old sort of police radios, we were trying to transition police officers to sort of a phone. But 4 makes sense because there would be 2, so there would be a cost per unit of $10,000 just for the police and the police radio and then police uniforms, a taser and all that. When we equip an officer, it's actually very, very expensive. It rivals actually almost the pay of an officer. So in the first year, we hire the officer and that's a cost. And then we have to provide the equipment and it almost rivals the salaries. So that's why it's so high.
So, and this came up a little bit earlier, so again, we're estimating that the cost in FY '26 for our 5th bachelor's program, which is early childhood, would be around $320,000. And it would be a Bachelor of Applied Science, cohort model of 50 students per campus. And they're estimating that they would serve that at 3 different campuses. So again, what we're looking at here is a potential cost of the programs of $800,000 if fully implemented. Again, but what we're looking at right now is just initial cost of what it would cost to get that off the ground and what we would actually see in FY '26 to start that program. And again, all these are preliminary. The vice chancellors have still several weeks to get in their final numbers, but we wanted you to have some concrete numbers to at least look at for our presentation today. Questions, comments on that?
When do y'all, are y'all working on when y'all want to get this implemented or gotta vote on? I know we have to vote anyway.
Yeah, so that's actually literally a conversation I had yesterday. So you can see that the goal there is to offer 3 locations, right?
So I figured-
And so we're having an internal conversation about pace internally. Traditionally, a bachelor's program has only been offered. Technically, the system office owns the bachelor's programs, and so system office has only funded 1 program.
Okay,
I have a request to fund it at 3, and that's part of this is okay, if we're gonna offer it at 3 different locations, that's 3 times the charge for the most part, and so who's gonna pay? Is it gonna be the campus? So that's an internal conversation that we're having. But we're at the very least gonna fund.
Ask why you would consider having it at 3 different locations? Is it demand?
Yes, sir. So this goes to, something that we'll talk about, later, but it goes to G5's cost per outcome. So one of the things that we're starting to track is if a new bachelor's program costs, for example, $320,000 up there just to start it up, how much does the cost per outcome cost? In other words, how big is the cohort? So a cohort, I'm told, is about 50 teachers. So divide the total cost by the 50 teachers, that's how much it's gonna cost us. There's economies of scale if we can produce 150 teachers, for example, with similar overhead. And really it comes down to the reason we're offering the bachelor's program in teaching is early on in my chancellorship, I met with all of the superintendents or their representatives, someone from all 16 of them essentially. And I asked them, what is it that the college can do for you? The superintendents all want this. So naturally, all of them want it close to them. And sort of, if you look at sort of the layout of Cyfair, Montgomery, and Kingwood, someone on the east side, someone on the west side, someone on the north. And that's the reason for those 3.
How are y'all gonna decide which 2 locations start first?
So we're gonna talk about that again. Each campus has its strategic plan,
Okay,
and it goes in line with whose strategic plan is best served by going first.
alright.
Is it possible that the same program can be offered at 2 additional campuses, like maybe central?
Yeah, so again, it has traditionally, the bachelor's programs, for example, nursing's only available in Montgomery, right? Because traditionally, the bachelor's programs, we have 8 colleges, bachelor's programs all want to participate in it. So the former administration, the precedent that has been set that I'm considering revising right now is that there's only one program and it belongs to the system. In order to offer it everywhere, you would essentially have to make a campus specific program, and then you could have 8 of them, but then it would be 8 times the cost.
Is there political consideration with respect when you're talking to legislators about a 5th bachelor's program? An expectation in their mind that it's going to be offered here, and here.
Their area.
That no such representation has been made. Or it has been made to me. I have received no request to that extent, sir.
So they're looking at the broader degree
Yes, sir.
availability for the system, which is kind of what you're doing here.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And so, and it goes back to, again, I have a very specific slide that I'm envisioning that I'll highlight this afternoon, where there's a strategic decision that I'm making about where our service area would be best served. Independent of, because one of the things that we have to navigate is the Cyfair president wants what's best for Cyfair, the Montgomery branch. So my job as the chancellor then is to say, okay, what's in the best interest of the system? And so this conversation is ongoing. I think what Dr. Vian is trying to flag here is that this is the 3rd most expensive really thing at the system level that we're considering. And just so you don't get sticker shock when you see it on, what is this? Really, but we're not at a point yet where I've decided where it's gonna be offered.
You did mention this market demand too, right?
Yes, sir. And again, this afternoon, we're gonna talk about it. It's on the slide. Promise you. We'll talk.
And then again, the number 4 things that we'll be looking at is student retention, that could be mental health, that could be wraparound support services. So those will be coming through the vice chancellor's request. And those have through the end of, for March 19th to put in their request. So I didn't put a dollar figure on those yet, but we're just looking at some of the items that you might see in next year's budget, just to kind of preempt that. And then my very last question or very last slide really for you all is, what is it that we need to be looking at as a priority for the budget for FY26 that meets your needs and that you feel like is important to the system? Because again, this is as much your budget as it is ours to support. And so I wanted to be intentional about having a conversation if there's something that you wanted us to look at, so.
Could I suggest that you put that in writing and send it to trustees with possibilities and then maybe a timeline for when you need to hear back or something along those lines. It would then also give us time to discuss in a future board meeting.
Yes, of course.
Does that make sense? Because I look at this and I've got brain fog right now.
I'm like, what, I
Yeah,
can't
so-
think right now.
If I get it, I get an email with very specific info, like, Mike, gotta do this, this, and this by this date. Then I can sit down and think and maybe come up with something. But feel free to jump in now, trustees. Seriously.
I know, I'm like you.
Now it's.
On overload.
Trustee Kane mentioned earlier, we're looking at the changes in tuition over the years, and Trustee Kane mentioned looking at the possibility of rolling back tuition. That's something that I would support. And of course, you know, everybody's made or brought up the considerations of everything else that would affect, or, you know, I understand that, and I would still like to look at you know, different scenarios and work through it. And if it's not possible, then it's not possible, and I would understand that, but that's something that I would support and like to look at, is possibly rolling back the Constitution.
So we will work through the staff to get those questions out to you all in a timeframe to respond. And then lastly, these are just some reminders of key dates and things that we will have coming up that nothing for you to do now, but just make sure that you're aware of. So, and then the last was questions, and I think I don't want to stand
Well
between.
done. You.
Dr. Vian, I'm gonna ask you the same question I asked you last year. You got to present your slides, right, unedited by me,
Yes, sir.
and you and I didn't meet about the content of your slides.
No, sir.
With the exception of changing one ranking from the 2 to 1, that was the only change that I made to your slides, correct?
Yes, sir. That is correct.
Could we get a copy of the slides?
Yes, will you make sure that Ms. Barnett has a copy of those slides and they go to the entire board?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Dr. Vian.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank everybody that had anything to do with this.
It was a team effort, sir.
All right. Going to get very formal now. We will now break for lunch. The current time is 1:26, and you want to do like a really, what does the system need us to do to stay on time?
If we want to stay on schedule, we would have to be definitely starting in it.
Okay, y'all okay with that? 30 minutes?
Yeah.
And very good.
Are we gonna come back with you? Yes, because we'd have to go back.
Where
to
are we?
closed session.
Well, that's what I wanted to do. We go in there.
No, we gotta come in here. Yep, so I'll put in closed session.
This meeting at 2:00 PM. Next item on the agenda, closed session. The Board of Trustees, in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, will now move into closed session under Texas Government Code 551.074 regarding personnel matters. The current time is 2:00.
There we go.
Thank you. I reconvene this meeting at 3:57 PM. Next item on the agenda is TAC presentation, Mr. Ray Martinez. The floor is yours, sir.
Where's Montgomery? Where's this, Montgomery? Montgomery?
No, Texas Associated. Tell us what TAC is.
Yes, sir.
Please.
Chairman Sullivan. TAC is the Texas Association of Community Colleges.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to be here, members of the Lone Star College Governing Board. I'm really privileged to be with you today. I'm Ray Martinez, President and CEO of TAC, the Texas Association of Community Colleges. Mr. Chancellor, good to see you, and thank you for having me, sir. What I will do is go briefly through a slide deck that I've got for you all here. Happy to share my slides. I know that folks here with Lone Star College have the slide deck. Anything that I present is yours to have in any way you want to use it. To start with, I just want to express my appreciation on behalf of the 48 members of TAC for the invitation to be here today and for the opportunity to briefly make this presentation and then hopefully engage in conversation or answer any questions you might have about the work of our association. I know that as I understand it, I think I stand between you and the end of a very long day. So I'm aware of that. Any good public speaker will follow the rule of 3 Bs: be sincere, be brief, and be seated. And I will do all of those things today as we get going here. So I'm gonna see if I can figure out the buttons here. I think I went the wrong way. Somebody can take me back to my opening slide, so. Then I go forward, yeah, there you go. There we go. Okay, thank you. All right, so TAC, we are, the Texas Association of Community Colleges, we're 48 public college districts that are members of our association. We are located in Austin. The focus of our association is to advocate for policies that expand access and funding and workforce alignment to support our colleges by providing technical assistance and other resources, in which I'll talk about some of those resources as we go through the presentation. Foster collaboration with state agencies, in particular the agencies that have the greatest impact upon our sector of higher education, the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, the Texas Workforce Commission, Texas Education Agency, things like that. And of course, we try to drive innovation in student success and education pathways. And we do that through our Texas Success Center, and I'll say a few words about that in just a second. This is TAC. The association itself is a 501c6 association. But we also have two components that exist within TACC, within TAC, and that is the Texas Success Center and the Community College Association of Texas Trustees. The Texas Success Center focuses on primarily guided pathways, working with success coaches, with academic advisors, with practitioners on our campuses to ensure that when students matriculate into our campuses and enroll for either a workforce education credential or an academic credential, that they get the scaffolding, the support that they need to make sure that they don't just swirl around and collect credits that are not going to be useful toward a credential. That's the work of our Success Center. We are 16 full-time employees at TAC, half of which work for the Success Center. And again, these are folks that work not necessarily on the advocacy side of what we do as an association, but with the practitioners on our campuses. The Community College Association of Texas Trustees, otherwise known as CAT. I think some of you may be familiar with CAT. It is also within our association, and they focus on empowering our governing board members across the state with information and with data to make informed decisions as governing board members. For our association, we just went through a strategic planning process, a 6-month process that involved all of our CEOs, it involved our team, and it involved external stakeholders. And therefore, this is actually our vision, our revised vision and mission that was just adopted unanimously at our January board meeting by the TAC, by the 48 TAC member institutions, to our mission, or excuse me, our vision to empower Texas community colleges to transform lives and drive economic growth across our state, and our mission to foster collaboration, to build partnerships, to advocate for Texas community colleges and the success of the students that we proudly serve. Our strategic priorities, and I'm going to go through these slides kind of quickly, are around these 4 areas: advocacy and policy, institutional and member support, collaboration, and organizational alignment. Again, these are our touchstones as an association. So anything that we take on as an association, as a staff, on behalf of our member colleges, this is what we put up at our staff meetings every month. For the TAC staff, which includes, of course, the Success Center staff and the Trustees Association staff. And this is what we touch base on, and we say, where the work that we're doing, where does it fit within our strategic priorities? And of course, behind each of these strategic priorities, we also have goals and other various measures of accomplishments that we want to adhere to, key performance indicators for each of these strategic priorities. Our current TAC officers, Dr. Brenda Case from Kilgore College, is the current chair of our association. Our chair serves for a 2-year period. Our vice chair is Dr. Brent Wallace, the chancellor of North Central Texas College. Dr. Wallace will become chair of our association in October at the start of our new fiscal year for our association. We'll have that position for the next 2 years from 2025 through the end of our fiscal year in calendar year 2026. And our secretary treasurer is Dr. Jeremy McMillan, and Dr. William Sadata is our immediate past chair. These are the 4 officers. So as an association, I do hear and talk to 48 community college presidents and chancellors on a pretty regular basis, but my day-to-day interaction is primarily with the 4 officers of our association, in particular with the chair and the vice chair, especially during a fast-moving legislative session. Those are the 2 CEOs that I'm in pretty constant communication with. All right, we have standing committees in our association. We have 3 standing committees: executive committee, our legislative committee, and our audit committee. And then the chair of our association has the authority to appoint subcommittees on an as-needed basis. And currently, we have what we call an HB8 Regulatory Review Subcommittee, a Membership Dues Subcommittee, Strategic Planning Subcommittee, which is now done because we just finished the 6 month of strategic planning, and a Communications and Public Relations Subcommittee. I won't go into a lot of detail, but the HB8 Regulatory Subcommittee was formed last summer when we heard that there was a new commissioner that was going to be coming on board to look at HB8 in particular, and to look at when we negotiated HB8 with previous Commissioner Harrison Keller, we were flexible in allowing much of the decision-making authority to happen through the rulemaking process. So we wanted to go and reevaluate, are there areas where we wanted to formalize decision-making rather than do it informally through consultation. So we had a subcommittee of CEOs kind of comb through with the tax staff, all of HB8, and have some things that we were ready to move forward with if we felt we needed to. If we felt like a new commissioner was not going to be as receptive to our sector of higher education, if we wanted to essentially formalize more of the decision-making around HB8. In the end, the new commissioner is Dr. Wynn Rosser. We've known Dr. Rosser for many years. So this regulatory subcommittee made a recommendation to the full membership at TAC at our January board meeting to just hold these things that we learned in our back pocket and not pursue any legislative changes around the current consultation process that is in HB. And I'm happy to answer any more detailed questions about that. But essentially, we chose to stand down on making any changes around how the courting board does its rulemaking process around HB and how they make decisions. And again, I'm happy to answer any questions about that as we move forward. I want to make sure that I explain that what the benefits would be for Lone Star College to rejoin TAC as a member. Obviously, from my perspective, as somebody who's been in the higher education space for almost 2 decades now, the unity of having 49 of the 50 and hopefully 50 back at some point to our association is something that is very compelling from my perspective. My commitment to Chancellor Castillo, as he knows, to Dr. Neil Mackin and Collin College, even though those two are not dues-paying members of our association, is that we will always coordinate anyway. And that's what I've done in the 2.5 years that I've served as TAC president. When there's information that needs to flow to all 50, it will flow, and it has flowed to all 50. And there's been a lot of important information that needed to flow to all 50 over the past 2 years because of House Bill 8. That's my commitment, and that will always be my commitment. We'd love to have Lone Star College back. Of the credibility, the footprint as the largest community college in the state of Texas, we of course would be privileged and honored to have Lone Star College back. And I speak not just for myself as association president, but for all 48 of our presidents and chancellors. We've had this conversation, and we would welcome Lone Star College to come back. Coming back is not just for our sake, though. We want to make sure that you know that we offer a variety of professional development opportunities, information that we give to our member institutions to make sure that you benefit as well on a day-to-day basis from coming back to our association. Our quarterly board meetings occur with all 48 of our CEOs. We do them not just in person, there is a hybrid option. So we get very good participation for our quarterly board meetings each year. We do a Texas Pathways Institute twice a year. That is the main programming for our Success Center. Over 500 people usually gather from our 48 member colleges, many of them practitioners, faculty members, success coaches from our campuses, but a lot of our CEOs also attend our Pathways Institutes. CAT, the Trustees Association, has its annual conference, which is always very well attended with a lot of very good programming. And we have our Board of Trustees Institute that we do every year, which is a training institute. It's going on right now, actually back in Austin. It was yesterday and it concluded today. We had Dr. Wynn Rosser speak to the group today, where we invite trustees in along with their CEOs to do some training. So we also do communications and resources. We do a weekly newsletter during the legislative session. So every Friday we produce a CEO to CEO newsletter, where it's the TAC team that puts together here are the updates, particularly from a legislative perspective. That goes out every Friday. We do a lot of data collection, and we also, of course, do bill tracking during every legislative session to share this information as much as we can. We collaborate nationally with our peer associations across the country. There are 25 TAC-like associations across the country. I interact with my peers who serve in similar capacities for their associations across the country, and that's a valuable network, especially these days with so much happening on the federal front. We're able to keep each other apprised as to what's going on, particularly with an impact to our sector. We also have a focus on higher education partners, an ecosystem that we build here in the state of Texas. And this has been true since I came on board in the summer of 2022. We knew that we could not pass a bill like House Bill 8 alone. Even if we were unified as 50 community colleges, 50 governing boards, we need support from the ecosystem. There are important, influential organizations that have credibility, that have a voice at the legislature. We have worked hard to build this ecosystem and to stay in touch with this ecosystem, not just to come together with them at the start of a legislative session. All right, very quickly. These are things that you all know, so I'll go through some of these slides quickly. Community colleges, this is data from the coordinating board. In October, the coordinating board provided the latest update on enrollment figures for each sector. And as you can see from this slide, community colleges now are the largest sector of higher education in terms of overall enrollment. A little over 700,000 students that we enroll across 50 community college districts, all in credit-bearing courses, either academic or workforce education credentials that they are seeking. You see there that public universities are below us in total student enrollment. We grew the most in the last academic year. We're the sector that grew the most. Overall, Texas grew about 3.4% in terms of student enrollment population in post-secondary. Our sector grew something around 5.4%. We're proud of that. And anecdotally, as I move around the state, visiting campus to campus, we hear that enrollment continues to be robust, particularly with dual credit and particularly with workforce education enrollment across our campuses. We are 44% of the overall undergraduate student population. That takes into account our public four universities, but also our independent colleges. So when you put all of that together, we're 44% of the total undergraduate student enrollment, but the largest sector in the state. 96% of all career and technical education certificates and degrees that were awarded in 2023, 96% emanated from one of the 50 community colleges here in the state of Texas. That's a very large footprint with regard to CTE training. According to the latest national data, we're the 5th most affordable system in the country compared to our peer community colleges across the country. And in fall of 2023, 66% of all bachelor degree graduates in the state of Texas had at least some community college credits in their transcript. We have a significant footprint. Now, this slide is just to illustrate that a lot of folks ask me why HB8 in 2023. And it's a frequent question that I get, and I do a lot of presentations with. I was just at Brazosport College a couple of weeks ago doing a similar presentation to their governing board. Why was 2023 the time that the legislature decided to change so fundamentally the funding model for community colleges? There are many ways to answer that. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but I will say that the slide I use is this one to illustrate, as you all know, Texas population has grown the most out of any other state. For the last 15 years, our state's population has grown more than any other state in the country. So much so that in 2022, Texas surpassed 30 million residents here in the state of Texas, second only to California, that has about 38 million. Now we're closer to 31 million, by the way, since we reached that milestone in 2022. Why does that matter? Well, it's good to have population growth in the state of Texas. We are the state that leads the nation in terms of gross domestic product, in terms of job growth and other economic indicators. We have a strong and vibrant economy. We want that to continue. So you would think that having a robust population growth is what we want to see in the state. And the answer to that is a resounding yes. But we also have to be careful because with population growth, if we have a mismatch, if we do not align post-secondary outcomes to the skills that are needed by our business and industry across the state, and those skills are changing rapidly in this information technology driven world that we live in now, that's going to be a problem because we could have a lot of new residents that don't have the skills to get good paying jobs in the state of Texas. So for the state of Texas, when they think about what can we do to make sure that we align the post-secondary outcomes that we need with the skills that business and industry need, what better place to look than the sector of higher education that produces 96% of career and technical education training in the state of Texas. It's public junior colleges, it is our community colleges. That is one of the reasons. With the strong population growth, the legislature knew it was important to do something to change the funding model and to put a focus, again, on alignment of post-secondary credentials with business and industry needs. And that's what we're all about. I know that that certainly is what Lone Star College is about as well. So that's one answer as to why the legislature unanimously passed House Bill 8 in 2023. It's also true that the Dallas Federal Reserve Bank thinks very highly of our sector and has done an independent report back in January of 2023. This is the cover of the report that's still available on the Dallas Fed website. And it is called All Eyes on Texas. It's a full report about the economic impact of 50 community colleges in the state of Texas. This is just a quote from that report that essentially says that they expect, with the study that was done with this independent firm that they hired to do this report, that Texas will see job growth of more than 4 million jobs, new jobs in the next 10, 15 years. And that while not all will be in this category, many, if not a lot, maybe even most, will be in this middle tier skill category. And by middle tier skills, they mean we need training of individuals that have more than a high school diploma, but not necessarily all the way up to a bachelor's degree. That's what they describe as middle tier skills. That's our sweet spot for community colleges. I know some of our colleges do offer bachelor's degrees, and we're proud of that, and we continue to support that. But the bulk of our training is done right in that middle tier skill that the Dallas Fed is talking about in this particular report. All right, so this is from the governor's website, that we are the 8th largest economy in the world. When I started this job 2.5 years ago, this same graphic said we're the 9th largest economy in the world. So just in the last 2.5 years, we've grown to become the 8th. And I think we're on track to become the 7th largest economy in the world right here in the state of Texas. We want to keep that momentum going. All right, so we shift to an outcomes-based funding model. Many of you will probably recall that back in 2000, the state's strategic plan for higher education was called Closing the Gaps. And it was focused on access. We felt like we needed to open the doors more widely to anybody that wanted to achieve a post-secondary credential. Closing the Gaps was our state strategic plan. It was adopted by the legislature. It was implemented from the year 2000 to the year 2015. In 2015, the legislature adopted a new and revised strategic plan called 60 by 30 TX. Here, our focus shifted from not just access, but to retention and success. So let's not just open the doors wide open to higher education, but let's focus as a state on the resources that we need to build that scaffolding, to build that support structure around our students to make sure that they retain, that they stay in college or university, whatever they choose, and that they actually finish a credential. That's the focus of 60 by 30 TX. Then in 2020, with the new higher education commissioner, Harrison Keller, who resigned last summer, there was a revision done to 60 by 30 TX, and we adopted what's now called Building a Talent Strong Texas. So if you think about that continuum, access, retention, and success, the focus of Building a Talent Strong Texas is not just any success, but the focus is now success with a credential of value. In other words, that a credential means economic mobility for folks that achieve that credential through any college that they attend, including Lone Star College. I know that again, is something that you all focus upon. The state's focus now with Building a Talent Strong Texas is on success, but with economic mobility, not just any success. So comes House Bill 8. And I know that, again, you all are familiar with the components of House Bill 8, so I won't spend too much time on this slide. I would simply point out the middle of this slide is the performance tier. That is the part of House Bill 8 that 95% of state funding flows through. And the performance tier is predicated on a pretty simple formula. It is awarding funding to our colleges for credentials of value, awarding funding for credentials of value at a higher rate for those that are considered high demand credentials, awarding funding for students who complete 15 semester credit hours of dual credit through a college, and awarding funding for students that complete 15 semester credit hours at a college, at a community college, and then transfer to a public university. That's the heart of the performance tier. That is House Bill 8. There are plus-up categories, for lack of a better term, and that is the more we do to confer credentials to students who are economically disadvantaged, who are academically disadvantaged, and who are adult learners, 25 years of age or older, then there's more funding that flows when there's a bit of a focus on those particular categories. That is the performance tier of House Bill 8. The 5% that it does not flow through the performance tier is for the base tier. And the base tier was created by the legislature because they saw that there were some colleges that did not have the funding through their tax base or their tax rate to be able to fund instruction and operations fully. I grew up in Alice, Texas, Jim Wells County. It's a one high school town. Coastal Bend College is my hometown college. Their ability to raise funding through their tax assessments or the tax rate is very different than where I live today, which is in central Austin. And I'm a resident in the taxing district of Austin Community College. So we had 23 colleges that qualified in FY 24 for base tier funding, a little bit of a help because they couldn't raise what they needed for basic instruction and operation. That's the base tier. All right, a lot more to say about House Bill 8, but I know you all are familiar with it. This is just a visual to show the legacy funding model, which is based on contact hours, was turned on its head. It is now, the HB8 funding model is 95% flows to the performance tier, 5% flows through what we call the base tier in House Bill 8. This is from the coordinating board website to show you these are the dollar amounts, the values that are attached to each of the outcomes. And as you see, there's a higher rate for those that are considered credentials or high demand value. And this is set by the rulemaking process by the coordinating board with input from our sector and particularly with input from the standing advisory committee that is here in this slide right here. And this is the current standing advisory committee. Some vacancies are about to occur on this standing advisory committee. These are appointments by the Commissioner of Higher Education. This is built into House Bill 8. The Standing Advisory Committee was created by House Bill 8, and it is the committee that consults with the Commissioner of Higher Education, and that's now Dr. Winrosser and his team when decisions have to be made about rates and weights that are assigned to the formula and other aspects of rulemaking for House Bill 8. It's an important advisory committee and one that we participate in. I highlighted the TAC position because the association has a seat on this standing advisory committee. All right, House Bill 8 implementation, just very quickly as I wrap things up. From an association perspective, once House Bill 8 passed at the end of the 2023 legislative session, Governor Abbott signed it into law on June the 9th of 2023. We knew, we were, as the association president, I was hearing from our 48 CEOs who were particularly of our 50 community colleges in Texas, by the way, 31 are classified as either small or medium. And those are presidents in particular or chancellors from those institutions that were concerned about what were they going to do now. They had a fundamental change to data collection, data reporting, understanding House Bill 8. What are they going to do? They were looking for assistance. So as an association, we got together and we decided to figure out what can we do as TAC to provide support to our member institutions. This is what we decided. We would help with rulemaking. We would track rulemaking and keep our members fully informed when rules were being promulgated by the coordinating board to make sure we had a voice on anything that was HB8 related, on capacity building, on data and reporting, in particular technical assistance, hands-on technical assistance. It's one thing for our CEOs to be able to articulate what HB8 is all about. That's a far different thing for our CAOs, our CFOs, and other cabinet level administrators that are at our institutions, and even beyond that, others, even faculty members, that they understand House Bill 8. So we took it upon ourselves as an association to go to philanthropy and to ask for assistance, raise some funding so that we can turn around and provide assistance to our 48 member institutions. We're very fortunate that we're able to raise just under $1.2 million. This is separate from the dues that are paid by the members of our association. This $1.2 million is dedicated 100% to supporting our institutions with all of the things that the previous slide showed you, in particular technical assistance. What we did was on the technical assistance side, we engaged a firm at the end of 2023. We did a very comprehensive written survey of our member institutions to find out what exactly are you looking for? What can we bring from outside expertise to the table to help you all implement House Bill 8 and do so successfully? All of that came together. Moat Casey was who we engaged with. I know you all have engaged Moat Casey to do some work for Lone Star College. We worked with them over a year ago with this substantial survey that was filled out by all of our member institutions. We did focus groups after the survey results came back. In the end, we decided to do technical assistance regional summits, which TAC organized in collaboration with personnel from the coordinating board. So these regional summits took place across the state. The last one ended in January. We had it here in Houston at HCC. This is a slide that just tells you how many attendance, what kind of attendance we had, where we had our regional summits. They were very successful. And quite frankly, there's still a demand for even more of these technical regional summits from our CEOs. So we're trying to figure out if we can continue to do this. We're talking to philanthropy that wants to continue to support our efforts. All right, and then that's just where we held our regional summits. One quick note as I wrap up here, the Houston Endowment just 2 weeks ago informed us that they have awarded us a $500,000 grant, no strings attached, because they support the work of TAC. So it is a general operating grant that we're proud to be able to work with the Houston Endowment. They pitched us for a $200,000 grant. We were delighted when they called us 2 weeks ago to say that that grant was going to be $500,000. Again, that helps to offset. Of course, we have member dues that we build our budget off of, but this is funding that helps us to perform even more on behalf of our member institutions. And I will end with this slide here, just to reiterate what I think you all know. Our priorities for the current legislative session are pretty straightforward. It is funding priorities. So we are seeking funding through the supplemental appropriations bill. The coordinating board has now articulated that funding that we need for supplemental is $89.5 million. We are working hard, as I know you all are, we're working hard to make sure that we can advocate and educate the legislature on the importance of that supplemental funding. We'd also like to get the funding that we need to keep the momentum for House Bill 8 going through the coming biennium. So in the General Appropriations Act, we're asking for the recommended increase. The coordinating board made a recommendation during the interim to the LBB. The LBB, thankfully, made the recommendation to appropriators to put the funding into the base budget bill. So right now, HB1 and SB1, the two base budget bills, both have about a 4.5% increase in funding, formula funding, for our community colleges, which will sustain our continued use and our continued momentum of the funding formula in House Bill 8. We're proud of that. So our testimony, whenever we go in front of the legislature, as we did just this past week, our testimony is to say thank you to appropriators, and our work is to protect that increase that's already built into the base budget bill. As somebody who's been around the legislature, I'm a former staff member as well at the legislature. You always want to be in a position where we have to protect something that's already in the base budget bill, rather than trying to talk legislators into putting something in after they've released the base budget bill. We're fortunate to be in that situation. And the final item here is to add the independent colleges to the transfer fundable outcome in House Bill 8. Right now, the student transfers from McLennan College in Waco to Baylor University, of which there's a long history of transfer between those institutions. That is not fundable under House Bill 8. They have to transfer to a publicly funded four-year university. We would like to add the independent colleges, University of St. Thomas here locally as one example, to the list of institutions where we can get a fundable outcome in the transfer metric. With that, Mr. Chairman, with that, Chancellor, I'll just end by again thanking you for listening to me, for inviting me today. Again, we would be honored to have Lone Star to come back into membership. We would be a stronger association with Lone Star formally at the table. But my commitment remains. I already consider Chancellor Castillo to be a very strong partner with us. We will continue to have that partnership, but we would love to have Lone Star College back as a formal member of our association. With that, Mr. Chairman, I will end my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Martinez. Appreciate it. Certainly want to hear from my colleagues, but before we do that, I always speak last, just so you know. I'd like to ask the Chancellor for his thoughts, and then his perspective, and then what next steps might be for the board.
Sure. So one of the things that I've talked to the board repeatedly even today is about, and yesterday and at the last board meeting is, I consider Lone Star College to be a leading institution in the state. And so we can't leave the state as well from the outside of this organization as we could from inside of the organization. As Mr. Martinez said, there are 50 community colleges and we are one of two that is not a part of this organization. So I think one, we have to play well with others. That's just sort of the most basic way to say it. Two, Mr. Martinez, I actually didn't know Mr. Martinez until I think we met at ACCT in October, that first time that I went a year ago. You introduced yourself to me and I think I met Dr. Serrata at the same time too. So I didn't know Mr. Martinez before the fall. And he's new to his position relatively, and I'm new to mine. And so we both have kind of inherited organizations that for whatever reason unknown to me, my organization, our organization left his organization. And so part of the conversation that we've been having is why, right? What happened, and you know, he's new to his position, I'm new. And so I think at some point we just decided, you know what, the past is in the past. Let's figure out how we can work together moving forward. So that's two. Three is I'm the type of man, and I was raised that you don't take advantage of a service for free when others are paying, and you don't take advantage of a service for free when you can pay your own way. And so Mr. Martinez has been incredibly helpful and forthright with me. I think nothing but good things about he and the organization since I became chancellor. And it just doesn't sit right with me to be getting resources that smaller colleges with less resources than us are paying for without paying our own way. So that's another reason that I asked Mr. Martinez to come speak, and really for the board, because again, I wasn't in this seat when our organization left his. So I don't have the benefit of context or history as I do with many other things that we've talked about over the years, because TAC was not something that I was involved in my previous roles. And so I wanted to give Mr. Martinez at least the opportunity to come make his pitch straight to the board, because I've always understood that the board played a role in Lone Star College deciding to leave TAC. So that's essentially my perspective, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. One more question, if you don't mind, and then certainly go to our trustees. I asked about next steps. If it's the will of the board, what would be next steps? What's the process?
So you could just send me a note, basically. It's really sort of up to the chancellor what kind of organization that we join, and I've been very clear to Mr. Martinez. Really, most of the time, I wouldn't bring joining an association like this to the board. It's really sort of up to me. But I also know that for whatever reason, this particular organization has received special attention by the board. And I got a lot of questions about TAC right when I became the chancellor. And so that's part of the reason that I've been meeting with Mr. Martinez basically for a year and a half now. And so next step is really just shoot me a note about sort of after you've heard everything that you've heard today. And I'm not even just talking about Mr. Martinez, I'm talking about my own presentation, up to the end's presentation, whether you would be supportive of rejoin TAC in those words, and just please send it to me. That way you guys are not doing an open forum, because I'm really trying to solicit. One, I wanted to give Mr. Martinez and TAC a fair hearing, because he has been incredibly helpful to me. He has sent me notes. He's been a friend. To the chancellor, I place a lot of value on that, because he and his organization most definitely did not have to do that. And so really that's what I'm after in terms of next step. I didn't want to rejoin TAC, for example, and then get a bunch of angry letters from the trustees saying you should have consulted with us. We could have told you X, Y, and Z. This was not what we wanted to do, and I just wanted to have a very open and frank conversation about that. And so that's really next steps. Chairman.
Thank you for being transparent with us and including us and involving us in a decision that you can make on your own. So I appreciate that. Any idea what the cost would be? Just
Yes, sir. So one of the subcommittees that we formed is to look at our membership dues, because it's kind of been an old formula. The formula is basically based on appropriations that come from the legislature to our sector. Right now, for a very large college like Lone Star, we have a cap on how much that dues would be, and that cap is $103,000. And it's, I think, 10 of our 50 community college districts are classified as very large. So those that fall into that, and those are classifications that are put together by the coordinating board, the accountability groupings. So those very large colleges pay no more than the cap. The cap can fluctuate year to year depending on overall funding for our sector. We're looking at the dues formula. That's what this subcommittee is looking at. We'll be making recommendations to the full membership. But right now, the very large college, it pays $103,000. I think it's $103,500, and that's not going to move much at all, even with a reconstituted dues formula. I hope that's
Let's go
helpful.
to trustee comments, questions, if you don't mind. I think I started over here last time. Could we start over on this side? And trustee Mario, you were probably here as a member attack at one time.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't be able to speak to the reasons why, I mean, I do know the reasons, I just don't remember how we arrived at, it, right? But what I can say is that, I've enjoyed, or I've taken advantage, I leveraged the resources they offer on their websites. And when I became the chair of that committee, the goals committee last year, and we had to know everything there was to know about HBA, you know. And I attended one of their presentations up in, West Texas.
West Texas, yes, sir.
Yeah, and incredible staff, incredible, knowledgeable people. But the best part about it is that the state trustees that were dealing with the same issue, I was able to talk to them, were they able to explain to me about things. And then, go to the website. I recommend, encourage you to look at their both the TAC and CAT. And there's no paywall. So I've been able to access a lot of stuff, and there's even a lot of stuff for board member training, chairman training, you know, board chair training. It's just, I've been impressed, and recently, got to, attend a breakfast up in DC, and everybody was very friendly, and we got to see the dynamic or the engagement between the leaders from the entire state in that organization. You know, Dallas was kind of highlighted so much, so I didn't like that. But anyway, no, I just wanted to speak to that because it is clearly a very dynamic group, a lot of great people and good leadership.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Trustee King?
Great presentation. Thank you. Really solid information. Thank you very much for doing that.
Thank you, sir.
Chancellor, I agree with all the points that you made just now. I'd be very supportive.
Commissioner Mason?
I'm also in agreement. Mr. Martinez, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
I'm convinced. Thank you for your time, and I hope we can rejoin, and maybe instead of having a rep from Dallas speak, maybe we can have some people start speaking.
Mr. Martinez, thank you for the presentation. It was really good, very thoughtful. And I just share the same sentiment as our chancellor.
Thank you. Thank you, trustee. Trustee Wilson?
Thank you for your presentation. Chancellor, thank you for inviting him, because I came like right at the beat when it was discussed. I wasn't for sure why, what happened, and it wasn't clear, so, but thank you for your presentation.
You answered all of my questions that I would have had. And thank you very much for your presentation. It was very, very, very good presentation.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
And I'll go last. Thank you, as they've said, for your presentation. Thank you for not giving up. And thank you for not writing us off. You know, someone who they left, fine, go away. We're happy without you. So thank you for wanting us to be a member.
Yes, sir.
And I'll close with just saying, it's up to the chancellor. I think you heard that up today. Make your own decision and just let us know what the decision is at the appropriate time. Meanwhile, our door is open for anything that we can do to help.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate that. Chancellor, thank you, sir. Appreciate
Yes,
it.
sir, no, thank you.
This is our favorite item today, adjournment. With no further business to discuss, this meeting is now adjourned at 4:38 p.m. Thanks, everyone. Really, thank y'all, thank y'all, thank y'all.
Right into it. Yeah.